Lucifer News Lightbringer presents the mythical astronomy of ice and fire.
That's right, it's the same joke again. Because recycling jokes is what we second-rate comedians do. Third-rate comedians, even. Welcome to Mythical Astronomy of Ice and Fire. Live Q&A follow-up discussion to the We Should Start Back reverse reading of the prologue. And I am joined today by Painkiller Jane. Say hello.
Hi, everybody.
And also Crowfood's daughter. Say hello.
Hey, guys.
And of course, Crowfood's daughter is from the Disputed Lands YouTube channel. Y'all know her by now, I should think, but I'm sure one of my mods will drop the link in the chat. Oh, wait a minute. Crowfood's daughter, you're a mod. You can drop your own link in the chat. We'll see. No, someone will get it there for you. You're a guest today. You're not a mod. You're a guest. And my, of course, the other guest who's normally with me is Sanrixian, the Hand of the Dragon, mother of Dragons. But she's a little under the weather today. She was wanting to try to draw anyway, and I told her, no, you need to rest up. Get healthy. Get healthy. If you try to push yourself through the illness, you'll just, prolong it. So she's resting up, but sends her warm regards. And of course, the last couple weeks, she has cranked out some masterpieces, from the Waymar Royce sword-shattering prologue scene to the Jaehaerys and Alysanne dragons flying and dancing masterpiece that she did last week. So yeah, I told her to take the week off. Like, you've contributed enough, Sandra. You could take the week off. But of course, we all send her healing wishes and lots of warm hugs. So that is that. Yes, so thanks for joining me, everyone. Sean E, 420 super chat. Ritualistic prayers sang, rituals performed, the body of Garth. Thank you, Sean. Thank you. So thanks for joining me, Amanda and Painkiller Jane. So let me start off by just opening up to general thoughts on the idea of reverse reading of the prologue, reverse reading chapters, or even some of the stuff we got into in the prologue. Amanda, I'll let you go first, since you weren't with us when we were talking about it 2 weeks ago. What are any general thoughts that you have? And you're muted.
I think that find is really very interesting. Like you said, once you find your pivot point, you can kind of retrace your steps and possibly see what the what the possible events were that were kind of like this, almost like this retribution and redemption arc, where the last hero possibly becomes resurrected, reforges his sword. He's able to fight the others, and it basically does go in reverse. He's fought back, he's pushed back, he's basically put into a corner. He probably dies, he becomes resurrected, and the events kind of just go back in the opposite way. And so I think that's very interesting, and I think that can possibly work as a redemption arc as well. So he might be actually trying to put right what he may have put wrong in the past. And so that's something that I'm going to be kind of looking for when I'm doing my rereads. But I think it's a great find, really. So good job.
Yeah, thank you. And that's a great point about redemption arcs. That's one of the things that when, like I was saying, was listening to Rusted Revolver and Ravenous talk about starting back, and they were mostly approaching it from that thematic point of people finding that point where they turn things around and start working back at, like you said, atoning for wrongs. And it really clicked. I was like, oh, well, my whole idea about Azor Ahai is that, yes, he broke the moon and was the bad guy at the beginning, but either him or his son or his sword that he made was somehow used to sort of put the genie back in the bottle, right the wrongs that were being done. So it really clicked in as thematically just really fitting with the sort of War for the Dawn story that we're assembling, all of us together piecemeal, with all these different researches that we're doing into Grey King echoes and Azor High echoes and Nissa Nissa echoes. Like, we're assembling, maybe not a specific story, but a general story with some choices. I always say, oh, we could have been his son, or we could have been his brother, or and it's hard to know for sure, but we're definitely getting down to a rough idea. And redemption arcs, pivot points, that really does seem like it's right at the center of the heart and conflict. And it's so nice because it unites a lot of the symbolic and mythical themes with the core of the narrative that you really get from reading the book. So that's why it really does feel like a good technique. And already some of the other myth heads have started reading other chapters backwards and finding some really interesting stuff. A little bit later today, we're actually going to talk about something that Colin Longstrider wrote. He took the Bran falling chapter, where he's dreaming of falling and then finally flies and almost gets impaled on the ice spires and all that. And he did a really great analysis, flipped that one around backwards. And yeah, it's pretty amazing. We're going to talk about it later. So definitely seems to be a thing. Painkiller Jane, what do you say to that?
I love it. Personally, I think it's great that it's a much better device that he's doing, instead of straight out saying, okay, we're going to time travel, or this Greenseer is going to try time travel. I think that's, if he had done that, I would have been like, oh my God, George, why? But this way, him doing this to the text and marrying it with redemption arcs, marrying it with the overall theme of bringing back the seasons, or broken wheel of time, I think it's just absolutely brilliant.
Yeah, it does. We can all see Martin playing with a lot of time reversal ideas. And, everyone knows I'm a little bit hesitant with actual time travel theories, anything more than like very limited time sort of messing with a little bit, like such as we see with the Hodor thing in the TV show. Something like that makes sense, like it could happen in the books. More than that, although I generally hold back on the time travel theories, but I do think this is more like this is more what he's talking about, the history rhyming, about righting the wrongs of the past, possibly the wrongs of your ancestors or your own wrongs. My name, Isabel Went, regular myth head, says, this morning it occurred to me that starting back, resurrection themes could also pertain to the oppressed regaining their agency. Yes, very much so. For example, the silenced woman theme that Melanie and Gretchen have both been hitting on. That's essentially the story of Nissa Nissa, right? She's silenced, her tongue is cut, her throat is cut like Stoneheart. She's sent into the Weirwood trees, who are notoriously silent. But then things come out of the Weirwood trees, whether it's resurrected green zombie assassins or the others. The trees are sending things out and, sort of regaining agency or taking vengeance, depending on which one we're talking about. So yeah, it's a really important theme. That's a good point, Isabel. Somebody says, LML, my daughter was wearing antlers like that the other day. Yeah, antlers are great. Everyone should wear antlers. I said that the other day. Jojo Lady Dane says, Euron parallels the Bloodstone Emperor. Could there be any redemption for him? Probably not. Euron has probably gone past that point of redemption, I would say. He's crash landing into the sun for sure, I would say. And, it's possible that that's what happened, that the original sinner, the original Bloodstone Emperor or whatever, he didn't redeem himself. It could be that his son took up his sword and did the redemption. And so, the father may have been past redemption. That is possible. We do see characters like that in the book. I think Euron would be one of them. I don't see Euron like apologizing to anyone.
Tywin.
Yeah, Tywin, exactly. He's did not have a redemption arc. He just went out all shitty. All shitty like.
Which is interesting, because at the end Tyrion is Tywin writ small, so he's probably the one that's going to do the redemption for House Lannister in a way.
Rusted Revolver's fired up for time travel. Let's see. Yeah, Aziz says, like, those aren't lying around the house. Those are his real antlers. Yeah, your children could be growing antlers. You never know. Could be. And then someone else says, my daughter saw his antlers once and totally thinks he's a real reindeer. That's true. No, it is true. I am a reindeer. I wouldn't be upset. All right, let's see. And hey, Alana Prestain of Bravos, I got one of your questions queued up for later, by the way. Yeah, someone says if Bran time travels, I quit. Yeah, like I said, I think
Agreed.
we're only going to see very limited messing with the timeline. Something not a time traveling person, but somebody who accidentally puts their finger on an event in the past and like kind of sends it haywire. I think that's what we're going to see, is that any amount of like trying to mess with the past instantly has bad consequences. And that's mostly what we saw on the show. It's not that like all of a sudden Bran can travel through time and put ideas in people's heads and he's actually Bran the Builder and this and that. Like, no, Greenseers have the ability to view all of time. And if they're really, really powerful, their perception and their consciousness can sort of put a finger on there and like mess things up a little bit. That's how I see it. I don't know. What do you guys think about that?
The way I see it is that George is making commentary on whether free will and choice affects the future and the past, and then trying also to talk about determination or fate or what have you for heroes and things like that.
Yeah, I've never been a fan of the Bran is a Night's King and Bran is the every single Bran that's ever been in the Stark family tree. And so I think that, what you were saying about Bran just being so powerful that he can kind of just, leave a footprint on, space and time, just more like an echo, is probably more what he's capable of doing. He seems more powerful than at least in this show, he seems more powerful than what we know Greenseers can do. And so I think it's interesting how his powers are starting to build, at least on the show. We don't really know what's going to happen within the books. This could be a show convention. But somebody has said in the past that they'll hold the door. They had a conversation with George R. R. Martin in the elevator, and I think that he held the door for George, and he made the comment, "Oh, Hodor, comes from hold the door." And George, I guess, chuckled and he said, "You don't know how close you really are." And so that's probably going to be in the books. So I'm going to be interested to see how it's going to play out.
Yeah, I think the main question is which door will it be? There's a few doors. There's the Black Gate, there's the door in the crypts, there's potentially, the door in the wall at Castle Black even. It could be, that's like the most straightforward, obvious door that you would try to hold against the whites, would be literally the door in the wall. But yeah, we'll see. What George has said is that, Hodor means hold the door. So we know that Hodor dies holding the door, and we know that there's some kind of time travel weirdness where Bran is somehow involved in the event that makes Hodor, the way he is. But isn't it true, you guys, that in the books, the story was that like Hodor went down to the crypts one day and came out and would only say Hodor? It was either that or like there's something about him going into the crypts and getting scared and like he won't go back into the crypts anymore. And that's why Bran had to like really push him to get him to go down there when he saw the ghost of his father. What am I trying to remember?
Is that Theon talking about why Hodor ever became? But I thought it was because he had a fever. I thought that's what it was.
There's a scene where Hodor was scared to go down into the crypts, or they were talking about it like after the fact. And I'm going to see if I can pull up the quote, but yeah, it's more of a scene than just people talking about his history and why he says Hodor. Let me see. And while I'm looking for that, I don't know how long it's going to take.
I see the one where like he's telling Maester Luwin that Hodor won't go down into the crypts. You know, and it was like he was scared, and Bran got really mad about it. But that's not what I'm looking for. There's something else.
Okay.
What interests me about the dynamic between Hodor and Bran and all of that time travelishness there is that George, if it does go down the way it did in the show, in the books, it would show the it's like a commentary on the direct influence that a person has on another person and basically derailing another person and their life by that direct contact that he does.
Yeah, and again, the main impression that I have is that this is something like messing with time is bad, and any little bit of it that's done is going to have bad consequences. So it doesn't make sense that in the end we're going to see that Bran is this all time traveling master who's all these people in the past. Like, that's a cool idea, and it's sort of like a different story. You know, I can see why people are enamored of the idea. It is an interesting idea. It's just more of a kind of a science fiction thing, or maybe like you might say high fantasy. So, you know, it's a cool story. It's just, I don't think it's this story. That's what I'd say about it.
Yeah, no, I agree.
So yeah, I think I maybe was hallucinating there, or just as far as that Hodor thing. It says that Old Nan had Theon Greyjoy had once commented that Hodor did not know much, but no one could doubt that he knew his name. Old Nan had cackled like a hen when Bran told her that and confessed that Hodor's real name was Walder. No one knew where Hodor had come from, she said, but when he started saying it, they started calling him by it. It was the only word he had. Yeah, so it doesn't say when that change happened. I was tripping there, I guess.
I was tripping too because I thought he had a fever, and then.
All right. Well, in any case, Rusted says he's voting for the Waldor. Oh, right, because Walder, his real name is Walder, so maybe it'll be the Waldor.
Waldor.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Nice. I like it. Good job,
Good
Rusted.
going, Rusted.
Yeah.
There it is.
Well, and it would make sense
Mystery
as a
solved.
Frey name, who's the Lord of the Crossing.
Right. So there you go. The Lord of the Crossing. It's got the whole bridge symbolism, the twin towers that are like the twin moons, with the river in between. Yeah, totally. Confirmed. You guys all remember Rusted Revolver solved it right here
Yes.
live on Mythical Astronomy Starry Wisdom Sunday. There it is. Y'all remember.
Good job,
Hold the
Rusted.
wall door. Hold the wall
Yes.
door. That's
Love
great.
it.
Mhm.
Nice.
I like that.
Well, that makes me happy. All right. Yeah, Rusted beating Aziz to the puns. Dude, Rusted and Aziz could have a pretty good pun off. We should set that up sometime. That would be good.
Yeah, that'd be a good one to be a fly in the wall.
Make your brain pop in like 5 minutes. Okay, let's see here. I'm scrolling back through the chat because I think I saw some interesting stuff there while I was flying through. Okay, you know what? There's a good question that I took from a patron that ties in here. So let me go ahead and read it because it fits. Let's see here. This comes from Lady Shar, wielder of the Sacred Shard, Ice Priestess, Avatar Witch, and as of just recently, Earthly Avatar of Heavenly House Scorpio. Thank you, Lady Shar. Bumping up the Patreon support means a lot. In any case, she says, sorry, this is so long. It's actually not very long. Let me start with a quote that leads to the question. A Dance with Dragons, Bran III. Certain moths live their whole lives in a day, yet to them that little span of time must seem as long as years and decades to us. An oak may live 300 years, a redwood 3,000. A weirwood will live forever if left undisturbed. To them, seasons pass in the flutter of a moth's wing, and past, present, and future are one. My thoughts, this is Lady Shar talking again, my thoughts that bring me to the question. We should start back, as you've shown us means several things. The circular nature of life, history repeating itself, day to night, winter to spring, life to death, going back to correct mistakes you've made, or even correcting someone else's mistakes or completing someone else's journey. That's all that we, all the stuff we just talked about earlier today. So then Lady Shar says, even George telling us that we should reread the books. Everything is out of balance. The life cycle's been interrupted. The dead are walking. The seasons are out of whack. And we need to go back and fix what is broken to restore the balance. So here's my question. We're told the Weirwoods live outside the stream of time and that they don't die unless someone poisoned them. Even the cut down trees still hold life in the roots. That's true. We are shown blood sacrificed to the Weirwoods repeatedly. It's implied that it's needed to give them a face, which is probably true also. Think of the Isle of Faces made all at once. How many people were killed to form the pact? Many, many people. Just like Azor Ahai sacrificed Nissa Nissa, and he's a bad guy. So her question is, are the Weirwoods themselves an abomination? Is their very existence breaking the cycle? That's a good question. And that is touching on some of the ideas that I've gotten into a little bit in a couple of episodes, as far as I've suggested that the Weirwoods don't look happy. They look like they're in pain. They have the silent scream. They're basically being invaded. The Greenseer's mind is like a parasite taking over their mind. They're essentially the Hodor, and the Greenseer is Bran, inhabiting their body and doing things with it. So it almost, I've also suggested that the idea of a white tree really suggests to a WIGHT white tree, because the trees are like zombies that are being controlled by the Greenseers, just like the whites are being controlled by, you know, Night's King or whatever is animating all the others in whites and stuff. So yes, I do think the creation of the Weirwoods with faces and all that may be an abomination. It may be that human Greenseers were never meant to exist. I've speculated that the first human Greenseer was created when Azor Ahai essentially killed Nissa Nissa to invade the Weirwood net, which is completely a hostile act, just like Waymar, you know, invading the forest without a care or heed for any of the caution flags that are going up. He's just charging ahead. That's essentially Azor Ahai invading the Weirwood net. So yes, I do think that that is possible, that we shouldn't have done it, and the answer might be shutting it down. So what do y'all think about all that?
So I think that, personally, I think the Weirwoods, we know that the Weirwoods are trees. The Weirwoods are a part of nature. And so to think that a tree could be an abomination, I don't think that's the case. But what you were saying about what humans are doing or what Greenseers are doing to manipulate those trees, to manipulate what their powers or manipulate what they have, for their own benefit, I think that that specific act is an abomination. And so what you were saying about how the trees seem to be emoting anger and pain, and you know, I think that that is probably showing nature's reaction to that. So yeah.
Painkiller?
I agree. Actually, as what you said, you know, with the WIGHT for as a, you know, pun on white. I always thought that the heart trees and the shade of the evening trees are like corrupted versions of the golden heart trees of the Summer Islands, as a way.
Those are very, I was very interested when I read about that.
They're talking trees as well.
Mm-hmm.
So, I mean, they're talking trees. So for me, it's kind of like that. I mean, and they're also raided by slavers and pirates and things like that. So,
and there's a golden tree in the myth of one of the children of Garth as well, correct?
Yes.
Rowan of Goldtree.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So
and it deals with a broken heart
mm-hmm.
instead. So heart trees could be broken-hearted gold.
That's really cool.
Trees.
Well,
I like that.
All of this lines up with the whole oak tree Summer King symbolism, because the oak hearts live in Golden Grove, and Ari's oak hearts, oak leaves are always threaded in gold. on his. That's their is green and gold is basically their colors. So yeah, the whole idea of a golden tree or golden heart tree, essentially symbolically, it's the same thing as talking about an oak tree, which is the tree of the Summer King, and it's always associated with gold. So yeah, that makes a lot of sense. So basically, I don't know if the Weirwoods are literally made from oak trees, but symbolically, they are like a dead oak tree. And if you remember, there was that Night's Watch brother giant who he said, "How do you like my castle, Lord Snow?" And he's literally turned a dead oak tree, the hollow of a dead oak tree, into his castle. And he's a small man named Giant. So he's a child of the forest symbol, and he scampers up the tree like a squirrel too. So he's absolutely like a child of the forest Night's Watch dude making a dead oak tree his home. And that is essentially like the story of the corruption of the Weirwoods. They are like dead oak trees in that they are the Winter King tree that's the opposite to the Summer King tree of the oak. And we see also the wildlings, when they go south of the wall, they carve faces in 3 different trees. One's an ash tree, one is an oak tree, and it's the monstrous one. It looks like it's angry and wants to tear up its roots from the ground and come charging after. So like this is really showing you like the oak tree, the Summer King tree, was mutilated and defiled, and now it is angry and it wants to pick up its roots like an ent and come roaring after you. And that's essentially the whole idea that a lot of people have come to, that the others are some sort of reaction from the Weirwoods, some sort of hostile antibody-like reaction, some sort of, protectionary measure that sort of went haywire. And now the children of the forest, who might have helped create the others, are now trying to help, like try to put them back in the bottle, the genie back in the bottle, if you will.
Agreed.
Yeah, anytime I stop talking, that means it's your turn.
No, I completely agree. I mean, oh, and Green Girl, she just reminded me that Penny Tree in the middle of the teats is an oak tree as well, with all that copper stuff, the nice sacrifices to it on it.
The lightning rod symbolism
Yeah,
of the copper pennies and the
exactly.
nails. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yep, that's the idea. That is the idea. And yeah, I mentioned Colin Longstrider. So Colin Longstrider, the 8th spoke of the Wandering Wheel, is a longtime patron and myth head. And he was really tickled by the We Should Start Back, like I said, and he checked out that Bran chapter. And a lot of the ideas that we're talking about popped up really strong in that chapter. So I can't wait to get to that. It's about a half-hour essay, essentially. And I think at some point, maybe like an hour into this Q&A, we're just going to read it and then talk about it, because it fits in so well with the prologue here. So KFAs, and by the way, Amanda and Painkiller, anything you see in the chat, feel free to pipe up and read it.
Yep. We have some super chats.
Oh yes, that's right. I missed one. It was in rupees, wasn't it? Or rubles?
Rubles, yeah.
So thank you. Morianthar says, "Great stuff, LML. Keep repping the antlers, man. Speaking of Bran and Hodor, do you think we'll ever see any actual consequences of Bran breaking the tenets of Skinchanging, or is it just guidelines with no magical backing?" No, there'll definitely be consequences. The question is, are those consequences ones that Bran needs to pay because the action is needed? That's sort of the theme that Martin shows us. Like, if you think about Ned choosing to lie to try to save Sansa's life when he was in the black cells, or Jon, Corrin Halfhand, explaining to Jon that you may have to sacrifice your personal honor to protect the realm and fulfill your higher duty as a Night's Watchman, which is really to protect the realm. Even if you stain your Jon Snow reputation, that might be necessary. So essentially what he's saying is that the thing you're going to do, Jon, is technically wrong, and you will pay consequences for it, but you need to do it anyway and just pay those consequences. And so I think that's kind of the theme that we're showing. Bran, maybe when he's, there will be consequences, but it's possible that it's a necessary evil, if you will. I definitely think the Bran Hodor merging is coming. Like, I think at some point it's possible after Hodor dies that Bran will use the dead body and become some sort of like giant ice warrior. I think that's very possible, very much in play.
Dragon Slayer Hodor.
Yeah, I mean, he's got the ice beard and the ice eyes and the big red sword. He's got all the symbolism, you know. So
Yeah. What I like about the tenets of skin changing, when I see things like that, like we are not supposed to do this, we are not supposed to do that, you know, like commandments, the skin changing commandments, I tend to wonder, I try to think why why do we have this rule? And so I'm wondering if this, the tenets of skin changing or the skin changing commandments may actually relate to something that possibly happened in the past. And and I'm wondering if it actually goes all the way back to possibly the Long Night. It talks about, you know, cannibalism, do not eat the flesh of others. We have like the tale of the Rat King, and he has to eat the flesh, you know, of his kin. I think that there may be some, it may relate to actually maybe possibly some events that occurred during the Long Night. So,
yeah. It makes a ton of sense. I've heard a few people propose something along those lines. Even the Night's Watch oaths, a lot of them are like prohibitions against what the Night King supposedly did. So that makes sense. And there's a lot of people have been trying to figure out how exactly guest right, you know, figures into the Long Night events, because it's such a taboo, you know.
Right. Well, you know, you do have Brandon the Breaker. So, and nobody knows what he broke. So it's, you know, guess right. I mean, you know, it's wide open. Guess right could be what it was. There's a lot of things that it could be.
I wonder if it has to do with like going into the Weirwoods as like the place of hospitality, through which somebody came in and did murder, you know, as a guest or something like that.
Yeah, I definitely think it's more of a concept than an actual, you know, thing that was broken. I think it's probably either like an oath or guest right, something more metaphoric that we, you know, we kind of have to figure out what he broke. But I think that that's pretty interesting.
No, I agree, because we have Brandon the Burner, who was specifically said to have burned the ships because of his dad, you know, taking the ships and disappearing. But we don't have anything for Brandon the Breaker.
Right. Yeah. So it's got to be something. And hopefully we'll be able to figure it out or learn what it is.
Well, so actually, I'm super glad you brought up Brandon the Shipwright and Brandon the Burner. So I mean, we're ready to completely decode this now. So we've got the senior Brandon. He builds ships and sails off into the sea and disappears, right? So we know boats are metaphors for Weirwoods, and especially when they sail into the sea and disappear. So the father went into the Weirwood net, and not only that, he built a boat. So he created the vessel that you can use to sail. So this is Azor Ahai creating the Weirwood tree, calling down the lightning to set it on fire, carving the face into it, killing Nissa Nissa, all that stuff, breaking into the Weirwood net. So then what happens? His son sets the ships on fire and destroys them so that nobody can ever do that again and sail over the ocean again. And so that is exactly the shutting down the Weirwood net idea, isn't it?
Yeah. Yes,
I like
absolutely. The only thing I will say in contrast to that is, how do we fit in the orphans of the Green Blood, who became what they are, sailing on the Green Blood with their little ships all decorated and nicely carved, after Nymeria set fire to her ships?
Yeah, I was trying to figure out how the Nymeria thing links in. So what are you saying exactly? Rephrase that.
What I'm saying is that the orphans of the Green Blood are kind of like Greenseers. They're surfing up and down, you know, the Green Blood, and they're not disappearing, but they're still kind of there.
Oh, they're like, okay, so what they are is they're kind of like the ships that went over the sea and disappeared and never came back, if you will. Because they're stuck in the Weirwood net. They live in the Green Blood now and go up and down the Green Blood. They literally live on the river in the boats. They don't come out, like they're stuck in there. That's like the Brandon the Senior, the shipwright, whose ships sailed off and were never seen again. So there's some people that like stay in there, and there's some people that like, you know, on the outside of it or trying to shut it down. So that's pretty interesting. And we also remember on the Isle of Lang, Jar Har, the Sea Green Emperor, who sent everybody down into the caves, eventually sealed them up on pain of death. So it's another, and this is the Bran cauldron theory, essentially. Like Bran the Blessed goes inside the cauldron that's raising the dead, and to shut it down, he blows it up from the inside, essentially. So that's what I think potentially Bran might be destined to do. Calvin Graves says, the prohibition on violence in the Weirwood net could be like the ban on weapons in Vaes Dothrak, because Vaes Dothrak, especially by the Mother of the Mountains, is kind of, it's like the city in the Grass Sea, if you will. Yeah, so that could make sense. It's another idea that sort of points us towards guest right and all that kind of stuff having to do with the Weirwood net. And let's see here. Then we've got another super chat from Brian Culp, who says, theory, Dunk the Lunk equals Hodor's ancestor. That's almost canon at this point, Brian. Actually, I think most people think that. And because George has said that Dunk has several ancestors running around, Brienne is almost definitely confirmed to be one, and Hodor is the other one that seems obvious. So then it says, here's the brilliant part, though. What if Dunk died in his last act of valor, holding the door to save the survivors of Summerhall? Well, that makes a lot of sense, because we know that but for the valor of the Lord Commander of the Kingsguard, ... Inkstain, you know, mystery. Like the Dunk did something heroic there. And there's the very cool theory that his dream about sand, about drowning in sand, is like has to do with the way that the pyromancers use like sand in the ceiling as like a safeguard against wildfire. Like when they go in the pyroman. Amanda, are you trying to cut in and help me out here?
No, I think you might have heard my knuckle pop.
Oh,
though.
sorry.
Sorry.
So essentially, when Tyrion goes into the pyromancers, whatever they call it, their caves down underground where they keep all their jars of wildfire, they explain that they have sand in the ceiling so that if something catches fire, the very thin ceiling will collapse, the sand falls in, it puts everything out. So Dunk has this dream of like drowning in sand or something like that. And some people have figured out that perhaps this is what happens at Summerhall. The sand is involved and he's trying to save him, or it's metaphorical. Simply, you know, he's trying to save Egg from the wildfire or whatever. But yeah, there could be a door holding in there. That would make a lot of damn sense, wouldn't it?
That would make a ton. He's as thick as a castle wall. So if we're going with holding the wall door, if he's holding the door, you know.
Oh, geez. Yeah, totally.
Yeah, I love that. When I read that super chat, I got excited reading that because I thought that makes so much thematic sense. You know, we don't know what he did, and it would just be perfect if Dunk actually held the door to save all those people that did survive Summerhall. So I was super excited to see that. So I'm got my fingers crossed that that's what actually happens.
Man, we're connecting the dots today. This is great. Good job, guys. Well, this is a good example of the collaboration of the Mythhead community. It's just makes my heart go pitter patter, guys. It's great, very great. So yeah, and I haven't in the Weirwood compendium, which I'm going to be getting back to here shortly. This is going to be fun. The next episode. So the last one we did was the Dany Greenseer episode, right? So I'm going to continue the Dany Greenseer astral projection Weirwood horse idea. But eventually that's going to take us to Dunk and all of his horse riding, because he rides a horse called Thunder. And this is a big Greenseer thing. And there's even one line that I'll spoil a little bit. There's one where Egg is holding the reins and it said Egg held thunder. And it was like, oh, I know what egg holds thunder. The moon egg holds thunder dragons. So in any case, there's all this really good Greenseer stuff with Dunk. When he's in the fight with Arion during the trial by 7, he thinks about his lance as his long wooden finger, and he's trying to reach out and touch the dragon on his shield with his long wooden finger. So it's just like the branches of the trees reaching up to scratch the moon, if you will. So there's a lot of really cool Greenseer astral projection horse stuff that's going to go on with Dunk and Egg. So we're going to get into some of that cool Dunk and Egg stuff. But yeah, the fact that he's thick as a castle wall, that's great. That's great. Too much fun. This is why, I mean, this is what motivates me to do this stuff, man. It's just so much fun. You have these moments, you figure stuff out, you feel clever, you realize George is even more clever than you are. And he like, these are jokes that George told like 20 years ago, essentially, in the book. So here we are laughing at them now, like, oh, thick as a castle wall, Walder, I get it. Ah. It's like George wrote these damn jokes literally 15 and 20 years ago. Good stuff.
Everybody in the chat keeps bringing up Dunk's mantra of oak and iron guard me well. And they're saying, well, they're like oak and iron. Scotty's like oak and iron door, guard them well, because I am dead and doomed to hell.
Yeah, absolutely. That's the other piece of it. So he's like a wall, and he's asking the door to guard him. So he's like the ice wall beseeching the door, like, hold tight there, buddy. Don't let anyone through. You know, that's really funny. And then here's his descendant, Walder Hodor. Derp, derp. Yeah, this is great. This is great. I'm too tickled to even concentrate now.
Oh, Rusted. Thank you, Rusted.
Yeah, teamwork. Rusted and Brian Culp with giving us the parallel to Dunk, which led us to think of Painkiller Jane to say that, oh, that's right, he's thick as a castle wall. And it goes round and round. Thanks, everybody. Yeah, this is what it's about. All about teamwork. We can all pat ourselves on the back. There you go. Rusted teased me the other day. He's like, oh, you're going to throw out your rotator cuff, patting yourself on the back. Well, we can all throw out our rotator cuffs together and pat ourselves on the back. But of course, again, all we're doing is figuring out the stuff that George did. So we can only turn around and we're not worthy. Thank you, George. Thank you, George. Hashtag be nice to George. But anyways, it's fun. Let's see here. And thank you. And please continue to comb through the chat and grab anything here when I am talking.
Yeah, Gal Yash. I don't know how to pronounce her name, but anyway, she pointed out a really good quote going back to what we were talking about with the going back theme and affecting the future and the past type of situation. And it talks about Andrew Farman. And he's like, just as a stone is thrown into a pond, will send out ripples in all directions. The evil that Andrew had wrought would spread across the land, touching the life of others long after. And that makes complete sense. I mean, Andrew is a man who is envious of his wife, of his dragon wife who can fly. And then he decides that he's going to kill all these women and then kill all these women and girls, and then himself try to make himself into a Greenseer and a flyer.
Flying out the window. Yeah, he's got all that failed Greenseer symbolism. There's a ton of ice White Tower symbolism on Fair Isle, including their sigil. Yeah, so that's something we got into last week a little bit, and yeah, that's worth expanding on for sure. Andrew Farman is pretty interesting. I could see a whole episode on Alyssa and Andrew and all the stuff they did. I mean, there was a lot of allegory there. It's pretty much all allegorical. In fact, Painkiller Jane, that's a great point, that he was jealous of his dragon sister, wife, not sister, but wife, who was ironically dating his sister, but it's pretty good. Yeah. So maybe you just combine those two and you get the Amethyst Empress, idea there. So.
Oh, absolutely. Because I mean, at the end of the day, Rhaena is a Venus character. She's the queen of the East and the West type of situation.
Yes, that's right. That's right. You mentioned that. I remember. That's true. She is literally called the queen in the West and then the queen in the East because she goes from Fair Isle to Dragonstone. Very cool. That's nice. Yeah, there's definitely some allegory going on there. And so going back to what we were saying, Andrew Farman is the failed Greenseer, and his evil spreads out like the ripples on a pond and touches the others. So you can literally like hear the ice cracking of the pond and the others coming out of the pond as a ripple effect of this failed Greenseer. It's good stuff. Good stuff. Stone Dancer super chat says, will you discuss War for the Dawn clues via backwards prologue? Yeah, that's pretty much what we're beating around the bush here. I mean, that's kind of what we're getting into gradually, Stone Dancer. That is essentially the fun part. But if you would like to specifically put your finger on a certain part that you want us to hone in on, that would be welcome too. So let's talk about that prologue. To me, the thing that really, like I was saying before, I was wrestling with it because I was just looking at the symbolism of who was a moon and who was a sun. And when I started keying in on the idea of Waymar forcing his way into the forest and using will as a guide sort of against his will, that's when I started to really realize, like, this is the story of Azor Ahai breaking into the woods, essentially, and using Nissa Nissa as a guide against her will, killing her, making her climb the tree and grab the fire of the gods for him, so that he can then go do his thing. And that's really amazing. Like, I don't know. I just really found that to have a lot of resonance. And what do you guys think about that?
For me, it speaks of the crone looking in through the door of death and then letting the ravens out type of situation. And it would be both of them combined together.
Yeah, exactly. Because, Wilsa, she climbs the tree and prays to the gods. And then here come the others, which are also kind of like the comet. So this is absolutely opening the door of death and letting all kinds of bad things into the world. And then by virtue of that, we also get Waymar coming to life, which might be like the Night's King coming to power. So all of these things have been let in by, essentially Nissa Nissa opening the door of death. And she, and that, in that sense, we should think about her as the Weirwoods protecting themselves, essentially. She, Will climbs the tree and gets the sap on his face and hands. So he's like merged with the tree. He is the tree now. And then the tree sends out the others to attack the one who invaded them, which is Waymar. So, I mean, that's basically the story right there. Pretty exciting.
So absolutely. What I like to do is I see things through the lens of the Grey King, just because that's how I think.
Absolutely.
But when you say that, Azor Ahai is manipulating those trees, or he's invading those trees, if we look at the actual tale of the Grey King, that's what he's doing in his myth. He's manipulating the trees. He's making tools out of them. He's making ships out of them. He's not, like I said, trees are a part of nature. They're natural. They are, nature shouldn't be inherently evil. It should just be, balanced and fine. So with Azor Ahai manipulating those trees, and what you were saying with him invading the trees, and I think he was even hacking at them, it's very in tune with what the Grey King is said to have done in his myth. Because if you really take a good look, it sounds like it wasn't a very good relationship that he had with trees. So.
Well, no, you make a great point. So he cut down Ig and made a boat out of it. So what essentially he killed the Weirwood and then made it into a vessel he could use to sail. That is essentially the idea that carving the face on the Weirwood tree is essentially killing it and turning it into a zombie, a white, an empty skin that the Greenseer can then inhabit and use as his ship to sail up in the stars. So that's almost like, if you think about it, it's more confirmation of the idea that, yes, the Weirwoods don't want to be invaded. Creating the Weirwood net as we know it is an alteration and defilement of whatever the trees were doing before. So we're essentially like a parasite, we the Greenseers, setting up shop inside the mind of the Weirwood net. And in doing that, we're killing the Weirwood net and turning them into wights, turning them into a dead tree that's now a boat. So that's great, Amanda. That just sort of clicked in as you said that. So the Grey King, yes, you're exactly right. That is what Waymar is doing. He's invading the trees. He kills Nissa Nissa, and then what does he do? He obtains the lightning struck tree, which is his broken sword. Like that's the symbol of the Grey King's fire of the gods, is this lightning blasted tree. That's what Will makes, or Waymar. That's what Waymar makes with his sin, essentially. So yeah, and he's got gray eyes too, of course. So he's definitely the Grey King figure here, and that also just sort of confirms, Amanda and I's initial take on the Grey King, which is that he represents the evil Greenseer, the guy that he is a Greenseer, kind of like right from the beginning. I was calling him some sort of Greenseer, or a Greenseer in some sense, because I didn't see him as like Bloodraven exactly. Like he's the one that he broke things. He invaded the Weirwood net. He wasn't a Greenseer by birth. Like he did this through magic.
Yeah. Yeah, I tend to see things on like two sides. Because he's called the Grey King. He might not be, an evil character, but he's definitely against the Greenseers, or against what they are actually standing for. So when I see two sides being played out during the long night, I see them as a gray side and a green side, a tree loving side and a tree hating side. And Azor Ahai was most likely, the Grey King was most likely on that tree hating side. And so you can see that kind of with some of the Tolkien references, because Tolkien did a lot with trees in his writing, and you could kind of tell how he felt about that character, or that race of people, by how they viewed trees. And so, like the orcs were, tree hating, it's just very, very thematic. And so he'll have, characters like Sauron Salt Tongue, and Sauron Salt Tongue was a very famous Ironborn priest. And of course, Sauron, was a tree hating person too. So it just kind of comes out thematically when you see some of those references with orcs and everything with the Iron Islands. So
yeah, that makes a ton of sense. And that's essentially what Grey King is all about. He's using the power of Weirwoods, clearly, because, we're given the impression that he sits in a Weirwood throne with a Weirwood crown, and he possesses the living fire of Naga, the sea dragon. So he's possessing that Weirwood fire. He's possessing the fire of the gods through this tree that got struck by lightning. But in doing so, he's killing the trees. So he's killing them in order to use their power. That's the theme with all of his myths. He kills the sea dragon, takes the sea dragon's power. He kills the Weirwoods, makes a powerful boat. So that's the idea. It's a pretty consistent theme. And that's the idea, Amanda, that you're talking about, the gray to green cycle. It's possible that Grey King did have a green origin, in that he once was one who was somewhat copacetic. So it's I guess when I say he wasn't a Greenseer by blood, I could be wrong. It could be that he does have a blood connection. Maybe you have a scenario where Azor Ahai Sr. marries a child of the forest, and it's the son who's the, both, that then is the Moonbreaker. Or it could be that the Great Empire of the Dawn has always been having Greenseer blood. That's something that a lot of the myth heads have been speculating about recently anyway. So, yes. All right. Painkiller, do you have anything you want to get in? We were monologuing there for a minute.
No. We were monologuing earlier, so this is all Amanda's jam. She loves the Grey King. I love her Ironborn videos. If you guys haven't seen those, please go. They are required reading.
Thank you.
Yep. And so let's talk about the shade trees and the undying, in fact, because Amanda and I go back and forth about what the literal truth of the undying, what those shade trees are. Like, are they literally Weirwoods? Are they a related species or whatever? But symbolically, I think we all agree on the basic message that's happening, which is that the undying are described as cold blue shadows and they're gathered around this cold blue heart, and they're trying to trap Dany and like kill her and take her power. So they are essentially the same as the Grey King. They're trying to take the fire power for themselves, but they're also like cold tree killers. They're like, and they are themselves like dead trees. When they burn, they're like parchment, and they lift their hands on high like torches. They do basically the King of Winter symbolism that all the burning whites do, where they're like a burning wicker man when they die. But
yes, and they're also described as enthroned as well. When Dany goes in, and she's talking about people being enthroned when she's there, and you do get a lot of Greenseer heavy symbolism going into that scene. And so we do go back and forth. I think that Dany is a very unreliable narrator when it comes to the House of the Undying. And so with it being surrounded by a grove of shade trees, I think that it's possible that the Undying could be analog, could very well be more literal analogs to Greenseers over there in Essos. But any way you look at it symbolically, it kind of shows through however you want to look at it. So.
And right, that's I guess I cut off in the middle of my thought flow, but what I was trying to get to was the shade of the evening trees represent corrupted trees. I mean, that much is obvious. They're black, inky black with the blue, and their psychedelic drink is all fucking strange and shit. So they could be. I originally was thinking about them as like a corrupt version of the Weirwoods, but now I think that they might just be showing us the truth of the Weirwoods in a different way. Essentially, like the Weirwoods themselves are corrupted and poisoned trees, and the shade tree being inverted in color, it's kind of just like looking at the Weirwoods under the sea, if you will, where everything is opposite and inverted. So it could be that we're just meant to see it as an analog. At the very least, I think it's an analog to the icy part of the Weirwood net. I guess that's the other way to see it. It's like the Weirwoods and Bloodraven would be the fire part of the Weirwood net, and the shade trees and the Undying represent the part that the others are freezing over and corrupting, and that's where their power comes from. So that could be, because I am digging the partition idea. The more we talk about it, the more evidence I'm seeing for that idea of the Weirwood net being partitioned. So
yeah. I've said in previous live streams, I think that it could be that they were once all either Weirwoods, or maybe they were all Shade of the Evening. I think it's more likely that they were all once Weirwoods, and they became Shade of the Evening, kind of like how you have the theory that there was this corruption with the black oily stone. I think that there's a corruption with the Shade of the Evening trees. And George does something, and I've talked about this in live streams before, with the word poison. And the Blackwood is kind of the Blackwood's tree specifically is kind of a tool to inform the reader about what's going on with those Blackwood trees that are over there in Essos. And what happened to the Blackwood tree? It was poisoned.
Right. And it's a dying Weirwood, which kind of shows you like the Weirwoods and the shade trees might essentially be analogous to each other. They're really just showing us the same truth.
Exactly.
Right.
So
because the poisoned Weirwood is the Blackwood. Right. That's what always stuck me about it, is like, well, why is the house Blackwood associated with Weirwood trees? And it's like, oh, well, it's a poisoned Weirwood tree. So
yeah. So, and I think that that's why the dreams, there's so many similarities, but it just seems like it's a little bit different. When Dany tastes the stuff, she says it tastes disgusting, like ink and spoiled meat and foul. And when Bran tasted it tastes almost like the opposite of being too spoiled. It's bitter. When fruits aren't ripe enough yet, they're bitter. And so we have spoiled, and we have like the opposite of spoiled. So I think that it's just kind of showing us what happened. So possibly we do have a partition going on within the net.
Yeah, and that's one thing that Colin was getting to in his reverse reading of the Bran chapter, is he found some partition evidence too. That's pretty exciting. So right on. So let's pause this very metaphysical discussion that we're having. Nine Nichols is bringing up something that's pretty cool. This is from Fire and Blood. and it's pretty fun to talk about. It not necessarily ties into what we're talking about, but it's fun. So in Fire and Blood, and this is probably something I think I meant to mention on the live stream, but didn't last week. So it says there's a little bit of an ancient prophecy that we hear about, and it's pretty exciting. We don't get that many ancient prophecies. So, and this one has to do with the dragon. So check this out. It says, and this is basically, okay, I'll go back a second. Sir Ulf's ambitions must be accounted modest when compared to those of his fellow turncloak Hugh Hammer. The son of a common blacksmith, Hammer was a huge man, with hands so strong that he was said to be able to twist steel bars into torques. Though largely untrained in the art of war, his size and strength made him a fearsome foe. His weapon of choice was the war hammer, with which he delivered crushing, killing blows. In battle he rode Vermithor, once the mount of the old king himself. Of all the dragons in Westeros, only Vhagar was older and larger. For all these reasons, Lord Hammer, as he now styled himself, began to dream of crowns. Why be a lord when you can be a king? He told the men who began to gather round him. And talk was heard in the camp of a prophecy of ancient days that said, when the hammer shall fall upon the dragon, a new king shall arise, and none shall stand before him. Whence came these words remains a mystery, not from Hammer himself, who could neither read nor write, but within a few days, every man at Tumbleton had heard them. So there's a lot of shade thrown on this prophecy, but whether or not it's a real prophecy or not, it's really interesting because obviously this makes us think of Robert slaying Rhaegar the dragon with his hammer. So let's entertain the idea that this is a real prophecy. What do you guys think? Is that it's kind of interesting, like the fall of House Targaryen might have been foreshadowed.
If I remember correctly, it wasn't he also the one that Daemon recommended to become the Lord of Storm's End as well?
Oh, yes.
Yeah. Yeah, so I was thinking, I was like, when she had not done that and said, oh, why should we overthrow these great lords? The reasoning not to give him Storm's End, they were like, why are we overthrowing all the other lords are going to be upended, and we're going to give all these bastards their own thing. And I was like, but House Baratheon is literally overthrown a old house, took the girl and married her, and then became the Lord of Storm's End, and he was a bastard. I was like, oh my god, that is so stupid.
Yeah, the Baratheon thing is like a perfect echo. It's like you have Orys Baratheon, a half-dragon bastard who takes over the Baratheon house, and then you have essentially Robert doing the same thing, you know. So it's pretty cool. It's a good echo, and of course Robert has a little bit of Targaryen blood, just like Orys did. And there's two other Baratheons that marry into the Targaryen line too. So it's one of those things that's echoed several times. But of course, when Robert rises, no man can stand against him for a while, but eventually he does get cast down. So let's think about this prophecy in an archetypal fashion. Who is the hammer that strikes down the dragon that none can stand against? What is this talking about in War for the Dawn terms, do you think?
So I think you probably know who I think did the hammer. When I have a video on the Garth and the Grey King, and I personally think that the Hammer of the Waters has to do with the tale of the storm god lashing down with the thunderbolt. And
right.
When we look at what the storm god might actually represent, it might be more in line with the children of the forest, the Greenseers. And so I think that this hammer, the storm wielding, is more like a storm god type of a thing. So I think it's more in line with the character that we know as Garth Greenhand, which is cool because, you know, Ulf, you know, became the storm king. You know, they recommended him for the storm king. And so you see a couple connections there as well. But yeah, I think it's Garth Greenhand personally.
So let's think about this. When the hammer falls and slays the dragon, this sounds to me like you said, the thunderbolt hitting the tree, which is also the moon meteor striking and causing the long night. This also triggered a death transformation for Azor Ahai. So Azor Ahai is the dragon that's slayed, and somehow out of this mess comes the others, who are then like lightning. And it could be that they are the ones that nobody could stand against, because Robert does have other symbolism, especially as he gets old. He's got those blue eyes, and all of his children have the same blue eyes. He kind of turns into an evil king after a while. So I don't want to go too far into that, but I think that the people that no one could stand against would be the others, and they come after Azor Ahai is killed, essentially.
I have a similar thought, but it's more in line with Christopher the Fourth Mud.
Okay.
The king of rivers and hills, the hammer of justice.
Yeah, he's
and
great.
Yeah, I know, right? He has like a ton of crazy symbolism, but I think like him, somebody who is echoing him specifically is probably the one that's going to take down the whoever the dragon is. So
elaborate on that, Painkiller.
Honestly, this is just like one of those thoughts that just kind of crossed my mind. So
talk it out.
Yeah. So Christopher Mudd, he's the hammer of justice, and he was the one that was riding around, right, doing like fighting all these wars. All these wars in the Riverlands.
He died in his 100th battle.
Yeah, exactly.
He's also got the tomb at Old Stones with the flowers grown over it and the face is erased. And he's the eighth king, I think. Eighth Mud King or something.
The 8th Mud King, but he's the 4th Christopher or whatever. So I mean, honestly, I think that's the archetype that we're looking for, especially with Garth the Green Hand that you were talking about, and whoever did the Hammer of the Waters type of situation or whatever, that kind of thing. So I don't know.
Think
out there.
So think about Greenbeard, in Barrack's Band. He talks about he can't see fire visions. When he looks into the fire singes his beard. And he's also got the green to gray symbolism, because the tavern keep, needles him about, Greenbeard, it looks like Graybeard to me, because like his dye is coming out and he's got gray in his beard. So that's sort of giving you the Gray King idea. He was a green man, but then he messed with the fire of the gods, called down the hammer. Then that made him die and transform into a Gray King, a hostile invader of the Weirwood net. So.
Yeah. So what's cool about the tale of Christopher the Fourth is we're also seeing those two archetypes, that Storm King archetype, that Storm God archetype with the hammer wielding, and with Eric the Kinslayer. We are seeing this kinslaying, tree hating archetype going on. Now, it's very cool because we see a connection between Jenny of Oldstones and the Ghost of High Heart. We're seeing connections between those two areas, but we don't know really why they connect or how they connect. But when we are introduced to Oldstones, we are told the story of Christopher the Fourth. When we are introduced to High Heart, we are told the story of Eric the Kinslayer. Now, Christopher the Fourth, he fought 99 battles and lost his 100th. In the World Book, we learn about Christopher the Fourth. Okay, it says the same thing. He fought 99 battles and lost his 100th. Okay, once we learn about Christopher IV, the next paragraph, in that same era, Eric the Kinslayer, blah, 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 blah. So we learned that they were contemporaries, is what we learn. And we learn about the Battle of High Heart, where 31 Weirwoods were chopped down, and the children of the forest and the first men were slaughtered. And we have this Eric the Kinslayer. So we have this kinslaying, tree-hating, tree-chopping down archetype fighting, most likely, Christopher IV in his 100th battle. So it's very cool because we're getting this hammer-wielding archetype, and we're also getting this kinslaying, tree-hating archetype right there. So it's really cool.
Cool. Well, I'll just mute my microphone and turn my screen off, and Amanda, you can take over.
I agree.
I'm sorry.
No. Don't apologize. I'm giving you a compliment. That's fantastic. This sounds like a new video being sort of pieced together here that we can look for on the Disputed Lands channel sometime soon. That's really great. I love that.
Thank you. Yeah.
Make sure, so when you make the video, Amanda, make sure that first you do the layer that the plebs will like, which is Eric the Kinslayer is the guy that killed Christopher Mudd. Then do the symbolism layer for the myth heads, so that the plebs can at least watch the first part and then like turn off, you know, and still like your video.
And that makes a lot of sense. You know why? Because Prince Baelor Targaryen is the hammer in the Hammer and the Anvil.
Yes.
And then Maekar is the anvil, and then he's
killing his brother.
Yeah.
And his brother's name is Baelor. So it goes back to that video.
Cool. This has been fun. I'm glad the two of you were able to come on the stream today. This is for two of us.
It's
very fun. Yeah. Well, it's always fun when you can start to see all these different paths leading us to the same idea, the same story. So that's when you know that you're on the right trail. You know, I sometimes get in trouble for insisting there is a right trail to begin with, but the way I start to feel good about it is when we find all these paths that seem to be leading to the same little clearing in the woods, if you will.
Yeah, sometimes different roads lead to the same castle. So
indeed. I feel Grateful Dead lyrics emerging in the chat. We've been having some good ones. George is a huge Dead fan, and the Grateful Dead, Robert Hunter, who writes the lyrics for the Dead, is very well versed in mythology, uses a lot of mythological concepts in their lyrics, and they love, you know, inverting things and starting back and comparing past and future. I mean, that's the kind of trippy shit that the Dead love. So there's a lot of that. I've got guys, my best friend is a huge Deadhead and lived on tour for many years before Jerry died, or at least a few years. And he is somewhat familiar with this. He's read the series twice, I think. And so I was thinking about doing it between two Weirwoods and having him on just to talk about Grateful Dead stuff. I know there's a few people in the fandom that are really tuned into it too. So there's a lot there for sure.
I think it would be awesome because I'm not really familiar with the Grateful Dead, so I think it would be illuminating for me.
Yeah, well, the Dark Star is the big one. If you read the lyrics to Dark Star, it's got like blue winter roses and Dark Star crashing, and like, I mean, it sounds like the whole Long Night story in a song form. So if there is a Song of Ice and Fire, it might be Dark Star by the Grateful Dead. Anybody wants to pull up the lyrics to that can check that out. So Gregory Namuth sends in a super chat and says, what about the Six Skins prologue backwards? Would he be coming back from the Nissa Nissa type going out of... Okay, yeah, so let's think about that. That one seems pretty obvious, doesn't it? Vermeer, if you flip it around backwards, Vermeer starts in the One-Eyed Wolf and inside the Weirwood tree, inside Thistle, and then sort of comes out and becomes Vermeer the Warg, who's got the Weirwood crutch, who then he goes down into the tent covered in snow and lays down and goes to sleep in the ice. So that's kind of like Waymar laying down in the snow and going into the ice, the dragon locked in ice, all that stuff. Yeah. And also, we're going to get to Colin's essay in a minute. When you reverse the Bran prologue, he's also coming out of the heart of winter into Westeros. So it's pretty cool. And that reminds me of, okay, so at the end of the We Should Start Back prologue, the reverse reading, we get to the point where Waymar confronts the others, right? And his sword reassembles and the others stab him, but they don't kill him, and they're impressed, and they salute each other with the swords. And then the others go back into the trees. And I suggested that this could be either the last hero, like reconciling with the others and sending their spirits back into the trees so they can be at peace, or it could be like the Night King sending the others out to invade. So there's a few of these reverse reading chapters that end up giving that idea of a Night King arising in the heart of winter and then invading and sending things out into Westeros. So it's a pretty cool idea. And that strikes me as what the Vermeer prologue might show us if we flip it around. So that would, since that has so many parallels to the Waymar prologue, it would be an obvious candidate for that. What do you guys think?
Nice. I agree. I don't have a whole lot more to add. I need to really look at all of those prologues, but I think that the Vermeer Six-Skin one is probably one of the more interesting ones to try and look at. So I think that makes sense. So What do you think, Painkiller Jane?
For me, it makes sense. I would just what kind of trips me up a little bit is reading how he was stabbed and then the squirrel skin cloak was taken from him, and then if that's put backwards, his skin is taken and then he's stabbed. Type of situation. Would that be the way or no?
Well, so the squirrel skin cloak is kind of an echo of what happens later with Thistle, and that he tries to take the skin of a dead woman, and in doing so, he has to die. So that's like him dying to go into Thistle and then go into the Weirwood net, which is the skin of Nissa Nissa. So coming out of it, he's like essentially coming out of the Weirwood net, coming out of the skin cloak, and coming back to life instead of being stabbed. That's the way I would look at it.
Okay.
But it's always interpretational whether you like I said, just reverse the order of the events or literally play it in reverse so that somebody falling is now somebody rising. You just have to sort of try to figure it out.
Well, and there's also some symbolism for the cloak. And I know that you talked about how the cloak represents, more like the cloak of darkness. And that's probably a pretty good thing to, Bran did say, our Bloodraven did say, darkness will be your cloak. But in the same chapter, in that prologue, and I like the concept of proximity. In that same chapter, it is described as his crowning glory. And
right.
So you see a lot with these Baylor type characters, or these like hammer wielding type characters. There is, Thorin Smallwood. He had,
he wore
Riker?
Jeremy Riker's cloak, I think.
Okay, so Jeremy Riker, his sigil is hammers. Okay, so when he died, and he had a sable cloak. So when he died, another character purloined his cloak and put it on. And so you have this hammer wielding guy wearing the sable cloak dying, and another person taking it and putting it on. In the prologue, we have a guy with a sable cloak, and he now when he's looking at that sword to take back, he's also looking at that cloak, and he's thinking about that cloak, and it looks like he's possibly thinking about taking that too, but he sees that it's all a mess and it's worthless. Now when Baylor, and we got another Baylor name, and we talked about how those Baylor names can correlate to that hammer wielding guy. So we have Baylor Blacktide. He had a sable cloak. Euron killed him. He's our kinslaying guy. He takes his cloak. He wears it. In the story of Hodor Amai, the guy who wore the pelt of the king of the hairy men, it's very heavy Jacob and Esau wordage here, because that is what Jacob did to take his brother's birthright from him. His brother was very hairy, and his father was very blind. And his father said, son, do this, and when you come back, I'm going to bless you with your birthright. And so Jacob, his brother was very hairy, so he put on something that was very hairy, and he went up to his father, and he got his brother's birthright. So with Hodor Amai wearing the pelt or the cloak of the king of the hairy men, it's taking his brother's birthright. So I think that sable cloak could very well be more of a symbol of his birthright being taken than that. And you're going to see it kind of thematic as well. So, with cloaks and stuff.
So that fits in with the idea of Nissa Nissa and Amethyst Empress being a usurped character. So that's the whole point. Is like the Bloodstone Emperor usurps the Amethyst Empress. The Amethyst Empress is like the moon. So the point is that the sun kills the moon. The moon's exploding smoke and debris cloaks the sun in darkness. So that's how the Solar King in the sky puts on the moon's cloak. So essentially the moon is being usurped in that sense. And so because, for example, the moon is like the Lord of Night, because it's the light that rules at night. But the Bloodstone Emperor now becomes the Lion of Night. So In that sense,
Exactly.
that's how it works celestially. But so that is a usurpation. When you take the cloak, it's very much a usurpation. And Waymar's cloak is made from martens, right? Or from sables, which is like a
Yes.
weasel. It's like an animal of the forest. So essentially, like he's stealing the cloak from the forest. That's what's happening. So yeah. Good stuff. Good stuff. And yeah, I love how the Jeremy Riker fits in. That's cool that he's a hammer guy, just like who was the other hammer guy that got his cloak taken? What were you comparing that to?
Well, we have Baylor Blacktide, and he has the bells on his sigil. He's got and his colors are green and black, so he's got the green in his sigil. He's got a name of Baylor, so we've got that connection to the dying and resurrecting horn god, who's also a storm god, whose name is Baal or Baal. Right. And also you have a connection to Abel, because Baal, as George has pointed out, is a anagram of Abel, and Abel is the brother that was killed. So
look at it this way: the hammer of the waters falls from the moon, according to my theory. And so you have Nissa figures who get their cloak taken, and when that happens, the hammer falls. So essentially, when Thorin Smallwood takes that sable cloak from Jeremy Riker, he's taking the hammer. He's like wielding the hammer now, and that is part of those meteors. So Thorin Smallwood, he is a notorious tree hater. He loves Craster, and he speaks up for Craster. And he's like, so it's funny. All throughout the ranging, there's this little running dichotomy between Thorin Smallwood and Dywyn, who has wooden teeth. Okay, so Dywyn has wooden teeth. He's a friend to the woods. He hates Craster. He's in tune with the woods. He's the one that's like picking up that the haunted forest isn't right. He's like, dude, I've never heard no deader wood than this. Something's wrong. So he's like afraid of the others, tuned into the wood. He's part wood. Then you have Thorin Smallwood, who's like, he's got small love for the woods, or he wants to make the trees smaller and chop them down or whatever. Like, that's everything he talks about. He's like, oh, Craster's a friend to the Watch. And then he's like, and he says, I hate those trees. When they see the Weirwood at White Tree, he's like, no wonder the first men cut him down. I wouldn't mind taking an axe to that thing myself, he says. So it's this whole running thing. So the idea that he's the one that takes the sable cloak and takes the hammer, that makes perfect sense. He's a Night's King figure, essentially. He's a tree hater. You like that, Amanda? I see you nodding your head vigorously.
I love that. I love that. I was coughing earlier, so I've got myself muted. But I love that. I got really excited when you were saying that.
Yeah, Dywyn can smell the cold. He can smell the others coming. Just like Cold Hands can sense the others coming, and they ask him if he can smell them. So he's like, yeah, you get the idea. Pretty fun stuff. And it fits in with what you were saying about in Tolkien, people who hate the trees are bad guys. It's pretty much shows you like who's good and who's bad. So very cool. Let me flip over to my questions here, and I got a couple of good ones. So Stina Fleming, who AKA Bulwer the Purple, Avatar of Heavenly House Taurus, newly minted. Thank you, Stina. Says, did you have a chance to read The Snow Queen and see if there's anything good in there other than the mirror shard in the eye and the icy heart as gifts from the Snow Queen? I think that 1844 tale could have been a source of inspiration for George, maybe through C.S. Lewis, because Jadis of Narnia is definitely a cousin of the Snow Queen. So I have not read this. Ladies, are either one of you familiar with this story?
So I'm familiar with it because somebody actually pointed the story out to me not too long ago on YouTube. They just kind of like, hey, check this out. Here's a link. And I read it, and it's very Night's Queen heavy. And so I can't think of like some parallels to throw out there right away, except for what you pointed out, PKJ, with Waymar getting that shard right in his eye. I think that's possibly a clue that he has read that story. But it's I love fairy tales. So I read it, I enjoyed it. And so I think it's quite possible George might be playing on some of those concepts.
Yeah, it's a lot, especially with the Jadis. To go back to the justice theme, we have the one brother who is like the betrayer, but then comes back as the justice one, the one who's like the lawful and the one with all the justice. I believe that's probably where we're going with a lot of certain situations, especially with Night Queen, and if we have all these hammer dudes on that side type of situation. But honestly, with the Snow Queen, it's been ages. It's been years since I've actually read the story, and I haven't watched the anime that was made in Japan a couple of years ago, like word for word on the story itself. I remember it was a brother and sister situation, right? So it's hard for me to remember exactly because I haven't read it in a long time.
I'm glad you guys have some familiarity to it, because I remember somebody mentioning it 2 weeks ago during the live stream, but I didn't have a chance to follow up on it. But yeah, sometimes the inspiration is simply like the impression. Like you read a story about a mirror shard in somebody's eye, and it really just sticks with you. To no pun intended. It just sort of sticks in your brain, and you want to use it. And so even if the circumstance comes out different, it's just like one of those mythemes or a motif that just makes an impression, and and just sticks with him. So I know that BT is going to write some stuff. Blue Tiger is going to write some stuff about the Narnia parallels to A Song of Ice and Fire, and Jadis is one of the topics he's going to be looking at. So you guys, Amber Compendium, Tolkienic Song of Ice and Fire, you know where that's at, and stay tuned for Blue Tiger's writing about that. I'm looking forward to it. I'd almost like to go back and read it. I love the Narnia books, especially the one that tells about the history of Jadis, and I can't remember if that's the first book or the sixth book. And they've got that whole like wood between the worlds with all those pools, that act as portals. So there's a lot of cool ideas in Narnia that are tying into some universal myth themes, and that are definitely at play in A Song of Ice and Fire. So a couple of good comments in the chat here I want to go back for. So check this out. Somebody said, first of all, bells contain hammers. You were talking about the bells of Baelor, and that's the dinger is inside the bell is actually a hammer.
That is true.
So you were like almost there, and so somebody gave you
Thank you.
Who said that? Questing Beast, Questy, my anger translator. Nice, anger ranger. And then Ned Braden says, Thorn Smallwood would like to ask the Weirwood tree a question. Like to ask you a few questions. Yeah, totally. Very nice. All right. So that's Magician's Nephew. Yeah, that was probably my favorite. That one was awesome. Okay, so back to my questions on here. Andrew Stephen says, could Night's King have been a warg? Glimpsed Night's Queen from atop the wall through the eyes of an eagle, chased her and caught her with a shadow cat. All extensions of himself, much like Vermeer. Well, yes, I do believe Night's King was a corrupted Greenseer or something along those lines. I mean, he may be the end result of Azor Ahai going through this whole green to gray transformation, is that the Gray King essentially is Azor Ahai as the Night's King. That's very possible. And whatever that case, I do think that the creator of the others was a Greenseer, and that it involved the Weirwoods. So Vermeer is definitely a Night's King parallel, absolutely. And that's interesting. The idea that, when they glimpsed her from atop the wall, chased her and caught her. Yeah, maybe he used animals to do that, kind of like Vermeer uses his shadow cat to bring women to his lair. It kind of makes sense. What do y'all think?
Absolutely agree. I mean, he's always talking about he's casting the eye on women that he wanted, and none of them had children with the gift or whatever. And I believe there's like certain oath breakers that that have the flew down from the tower, like word for word situation. I know that Mance has it, and so do the 3 guys that were with Osha have the same line with him with that situation.
Nice.
And
Even the idea of casting an eye upon somebody is the idea of an eye becoming like a projectile. That's pretty cool. And also makes you think of Baelor from Welsh myth, Baelor of the evil eye, because when he's killed, his head like falls down and the burning eye like burns a hole in the ground. So that's casting your eye, if you will. Thanks, Jojo Lady Dane, for linking Blue Tiger's page in the chat. Make sure to add that to the description too.
And every time I ever see something with one eye, all I ever think about is Samuel L. Jackson saying, "I got my good eye on you," from Winter Soldier.
Nice. All right, so let's see here. Alana, okay, this fits right in. Alana Prestane of Bravos, keeper of the notorious glorious cloister. That's your new nickname, by the way, Alana. I just gave that to you. So she says, I read something recently about Weirwood arrows and their potential to kill dragons. And the rumor from that comes from Torrhen Stark, the king who knelt. His bastard brother, Brandon Snow, he had a plan. Instead of kneeling to the Targaryens, he wanted to sneak across the river and kill the dragons with Weirwood arrows, because he thought that killing a dragon with a Weirwood arrow was a thing that could happen. So that's where that rumor comes from. And Elena asks, I'd like to hear a discussion about that, especially since it's going to be an important part of the end game, potentially killing dragons. Would it kill a dragon? Would it be reversed from being a white if it was a white dragon? Would it infuse the dragon with the knowledge of the Weirwood net? What would happen? So thoughts, guys, what do you think? We're just talking about shooting things through the eye. So will we see a Weirwood arrow used to kill a dragon? Or could it be used to put a white dragon out of its misery? Or what do you think?
Well, we've already seen a Weirwood arrow kill a dragon when the Redgrass Field with Daemon Blackfire. And so there's some symbolism for that. There is. But we don't really know what the properties are going to be with Weirwood against a dragon yet. So it could be symbolic, which would be cool too. But I'm kind of interested to see what could possibly happen. I don't know where he would have gotten that knowledge from. We don't really hear about this knowledge. Is this a lost knowledge? Is this, if it's true, did he receive a vision? What catalyzed him to make his arrows out of Weirwood, if that is the case, that they are effective against dragons. So I'm a little bit interested in that respect, if Weirwood is a good weapon against dragons. I'd like to know where he got that information.
Yeah, it sounds like an old northern myth,
Yeah.
which begs the question, why do northerners have ancient myths about how to kill dragons? I wonder. It's because they were there before, but go ahead, Painkiller.
For me, okay, so whenever I think about that, Brandon Snow, for me, when I think of Weirwood arrows, and you have done lots of like information about it being ash trees, the Weirwoods being ash trees, I always think of ash bows, and then I go to thinking about Boash, the blind god from Lorath. And for me, a blind guy.
Hold on. I'm sorry. Hold on. You just popped a brain cell. Give me a second.
Okay.
So instead of ash bows, you're talking about bow ash.
Yes.
Oh,
yes.
Okay.
The
That's
blind
cool.
god. And
right.
for me,
All right.
that's a guy, a blind god that's named that's Ash Bow, technically. It brings up the Hodor myth and Balder myth, where Balder, the blind god, is tricked by Loki to killing his brother, the god of light. And that for me is kind of the situation here. When I think about Brandon, I think he's echoing
The
the
mistletoe arrows.
yes,
I like
yes,
that.
exactly. That's what I'm thinking. I'm
That
thinking
makes sense.
I'm thinking that that's like part of the original situation, that how he killed the dragon, in to make more dragons type of situation. You get what I'm saying?
I like that.
What do you mean to make more dragons?
He was Azora High. That's what I think.
Okay, I'm sorry. Who was Azor Ahai?
All right. So I'm thinking that Brandon with the ash bow and ash arrows or whatever is the one killing the god's eye.
Okay, gotcha.
Okay. All right.
Which would be akin to shooting the dragon in the eye, because the Urax myth, the dragon's eye represents the god's eye, the sun moon thing, and when Serwyn spears it, that's the comet essentially hitting the moon. So okay, that all makes sense. Now check this out. The other time we see a dragon killed in the eye with an arrow, it is Tessarion, the Blue Queen. She's injured and she's essentially dying, and it's a mercy kill. It's after the battle, and they're putting her out of her misery. And so Bill Burley, who has a very interesting sigil, kills the dragon with 3 arrows to the eye. And Bill Burley's sigil is a white knife on a field of blue, which is dawn. It's dawn, specifically in the form of the frozen white knife river symbol. It's white on blue. It's a white knife instead of a sword. So this is dawn as an ice sword. So Amanda, both you and I've discovered, have a similar belief that dawn may be made from Weirwood in some way. Either it was used in the reaction, the forging, maybe the pale stone of a petrified Weirwood is part of the pale stone mythology of dawn, something like that. I've found scenes where the Weirwoods are growing icy teeth, and of course teeth are what the wolves always describe as swords and spears are always tooths and claws and teeth. Not tooths, I'm sorry. It's a tooth or teeth. That's what I'm trying to say. So I think that when Weirwoods grow icy teeth, that's essentially like making a white sword of ice from a Weirwood somehow. I haven't figured out how that works, but the symbolism has been suggesting it for a long time. So Amanda, you want to add your thoughts to that?
Well, first of all, and you've done a lot of stuff with your Weirwood goddess stuff, and maybe when we're talking about the myth of Nissa Nissa, maybe we're talking about her when she's embodied as a Weirwood as well. But yeah, you see a lot of stuff in the books. The glowing of the Weirwood door of the Night Fort and the glowing of dawn is actually described in a very, very similar manner.
Yes.
And I have a theory about Shade of the Evening and the oily black stone. And anyway, I think that the Valyrian steel swords may actually be made of that wood because it's described as drinking the light. And there's similar wording with black oily stones and the House of the Undying. But anyway, you just see so much just kind of time and time again with the Weirwoods and with dawn. There's just a lot of really symbolic wording, and I think that it's a great possibility. And now I see a lot of the connections as well with the other side, and that's kind of how I had put two and two together, because I noticed it on the other end, on the black sword side.
Right. And remember, I've been throwing out the idea that dawn might be a dragon killing sword for various reasons, because I keep seeing that idea being suggested. And then we see a guy with a white knife sigil shooting a dragon with arrows. They're not said to be Weirwood arrows, but we can interpret the symbolism. He's a white sword dude shooting arrows into the dragon's eye. And elsewhere, we're told that Weirwood arrows are the thing you want to shoot in the eye. But a Weirwood arrow is really just a projectile coming from a Weirwood tree. And dawn might be essentially that. It might be a Weirwood projectile in a sense. I'm not sure exactly how, but that's what's being suggested. So We'll figure it out. But it's pretty cool stuff. We see it at the Eyrie too. The Eyrie has a lot of icy spears growing from the pale stone. It's all over the place, and it really makes me see like, okay, these are icy swords that come from pale stone. So it's a great dawn is ice. And yeah, to what you were saying, the Black Gate door glows like milk and moonlight. And dawn is alive with light and pale as milk glass. And then the other thing we see of milk glass are the bones of the others. The Weirwoods are bone white. The others have bone white hands. So like sort of milk, bone, moonlight, Weirwoods, dawn, and the others. They form this merry-go-round of the same words that are used to describe all of them. So it's pretty interesting. Yeah, good stuff.
Dana Batts, she just said something. Ice killed the fireworms in Aria, in Area. Sorry,
it did.
Yeah. So it killed her. It killed her. It stopped her heart, which is essentially the same thing. But it
killed the dragon worms too.
Yeah, and then it made them eject out of her body.
And it wasn't even a bath. It was a tub full of ice.
Ice, yeah.
So specifically, it's ice. And if dawn is ice, as I insist it is, then this is ice killing dragons. Nice. Ah! I'm going to have you on every week, Painkiller Jane. You're never leaving. You're chained to the desk. Like a Greenseer. So, by the way, guys, I will stop and just remind you that I put out my first patron-only episode, which was Jamie and Brienne sword fighting in the Riverlands by Maidenpool, and it turned into a full 10,000-word essay, which means it's about an hour podcast if it was a podcast, and it is only available to patrons. It is available to patrons of all levels, so even a $1 donation will unlock access to it, but I am the sales and marketing department of my brain, which is very small. Occasionally pipes up and reminds me to promote my program, which I'm supposed to do apparently. So there you go, guys. If you sign up for Patreon, you will be both supporting mythical astronomy and propelling us higher and upward into the future. And you'll also get that nice little extra tasty treat of the Jamie and Brienne episode. And guess what? It has a lot of parallels to the Waymar prologue and ties into a lot of these ideas. So it's very much within the stream of consciousness of what we're talking about. And yes, Amanda, thank you. There was a $5 super chat from Stephiz. Thank you, Stephiz. And Gregory Namuth also hit me with one and says, shade is made from a Weirwood type from the East, right? Well, Gregory, that's sort of what we've all been debating. Like is it related to a Weirwood? Is it an alt Weirwood? Is it a symbol of a Weirwood? It's hard to say. It's one of those things. So we're just trying to figure out how literal the symbolism is in there. But there's endless parallels, obviously, between the shade trees and the Weirwoods, the undying and the Greenseers. So, if you missed any of the beginning of this live stream, definitely listen back because we talked about a lot of that stuff, at least in passing there. Sean E. speaking up for my Jamie Brienne essay. Thanks. Appreciate that, Sean E. It was a lot of fun.
Very good. It was very good.
Oh, cool. All right. Thank you.
I enjoyed it.
Let's see here. Yeah, it could be that the Weirwoods are involved in the sword process because one of the ways you make steel is by adding a source of carbon to the steel, to the iron as you're forging it. And bone ash is one of the most popular ancient sources of carbon. The Weirwoods, where burnt trees would be another one, burnt logs, obviously. The Weirwoods are white as bone. So you get the idea of maybe burnt Weirwood ash was used in the forging of the sword. It could be something as simple as that, or it could be the pale stone idea. There's a couple ways. Or you could just imagine like Weirwood magic somehow being involved in the forging process in some more magical way. And there's not actually Weirwood substance in the sword, but the magic of it somehow. That would also work and fit the symbolism. But also the other part about that is that the Starks love to use wooden swords, which are tree swords. It happens all the time. In fact, here, I'm going to pull up the Dawn is a Dagger of Light quote because it has a tree sword in it. I love this one. I've been holding this out forever. I've given you the Dawn Dagger of Light quote before, but I held out on you on the tree sword part. So check this out. As she slept amidst the rolling grasslands, Catelyn dreamt that Bran was whole again, that Arya and Sansa held hands, that Rickon was still a babe at her breast. Robb, crownless, played with a wooden sword, and when all were safe asleep, she found Ned in her bed, smiling. Sweet it was, sweet and gone too soon. Dawn came cruel, a dagger of light. She woke aching and alone and weary, and then she goes on and on. So basically, this is the chapter where she's coming to grips with the fact that her son is king in the north, leading an army, and is in very much in danger. And so her dream is for this innocent time before, Robb, crownless, played with a wooden sword. So before he became the king of winter, essentially. But then Dawn came cruel, a dagger of light. And with this dagger of light comes the realization that Robb is the king of winter. And of course, when we see him enthroned, his sword runs with morning light, which makes us think of Dawn. So it just tells you that Dawn, the dagger of light, belongs in the hands of the king of winter. However, it might also be, in some sense, a wooden sword because it came from a tree. So what do you think about that, Amanda? Oh, Amanda stepped out. What do you think about that, Painkiller?
I'm still here. I just took my video off for a second. No, I like that. And I like the idea that the Starks, they start out with a wooden sword. So they start basically when they're training, when they start out with their sword fighting, it starts out as a wooden sword, and it progresses to a steel sword once they, kind of hit that manhood benchmark, or however you want to word it. And so I like it how we can kind of see the progression with Robb specifically, that our King of Winter, from a wooden sword to a steel sword. So.
Right. So it's like a progression. Exactly. And someone's pointing out, well, practice swords are wooden swords. Right. But for some reason, it's the Starks that George writes with them all the time. Like it's this whole thing where Joffrey wants to wield live steel and Robb's only allowed to play with a wooden sword. So it's a recurring motif. Arya uses a stick sword and a broom sword when she's up in the Kingdom of the Leaves and training and sword fighting. So it's a very consistent and repeated association with wooden swords and Starks.
Isn't Arya's wooden sword with her dancing master, isn't it filled with iron as well?
Yes, those training swords are. But she also makes one herself later at Harrenhal with a broken broomstick too. But you're right. I guess the symbol, iron inside the wood, right? It's an iron and wood thing. Yeah, totally. Oak and iron, I guess, is one way to think about it, right? So here's the other thing. So next week, I haven't completely pinned this down with Gray Area, but I think that we're going to do this next week. And if it's not next week, it'll be very soon. But we're going to do it between two Weirwoods, where I'm basically interviewing Gray, having a conversation with Gray Area one-on-one about some of the recent work that she's been doing that happens to intersect with a lot of my work really well. And she's been writing about the memory, sorrow, and thorn influences on A Song of Ice and Fire. And that's a series by Tad Williams, a famous fantasy author that George has often cited as one of the reasons and the inspirations for him to get into fantasy specifically instead of sci-fi that he had been writing. Although his sci-fi has always been very fantasy-like. But that being said, Memory, Sorrow, and Thorn is a really interesting series. I have not read it, but I've heard people talk about it. And the people who've talked about it, it's very obvious that this is a big influence. I mean, George acknowledges it as an influence, but when you get into it, you can really see it. And there's this thing about the hero needs to forge this magic sword, and he does it by poisoning a tree and turning it to iron, and then like forging the sword out of the tree somehow, which is really similar to everything we've been talking about poisoning the Weirwood net, the tree sword, Lightbringer, and the burning tree being sort of interchangeable symbols of the fire of the gods. So I just watched this recent video by Gray, and my brain was just like blowing up, and I was like frantically typing her. I wasn't even halfway through it. I was like, dude, we got to talk about this. And yeah, I see Aziz nodding his head. I'm aware that you're into it, Aziz. I know you're one of the ones that's read it. So we're gonna do a roundtable like I said, either next week or very soon, Gray and I, and we're going to talk about this, these ideas, and try to get into what it means, because it really interlocks with a lot of this stuff. So
It
very,
probably
very cool.
it probably intersects with why the Ironwoods in Dorne are called the Blood Royals. Probably. I mean,
Yeah,
being
probably.
royal blood is being blue-blooded, so that's an other-ish type of theme.
Okay, very good. So it's fruitful ground to be plowed. Let's say that. So I'm very excited about that, and this is basically what I'm trying to tell you is go watch Gray's video on this, and I think she might have an earlier video about Memory, Sorrow, and Thorn too, and you should watch that as well. She's been putting out a lot of really good videos lately, to be honest. But if you're not subscribed to Gray Area, definitely subscribe and check out that one specifically about Lightbringer and the Weirwoods. I forget what the title of it is. If one of my mods could look it up here in the next couple minutes, that'd be awesome. But definitely go to Gray Area's channel and check that out, so you'll be filled in on that stuff when we do that episode. So, and yeah, I see Disputed Lands vouching for Gray in the chat. You've worked with Gray a couple times, haven't you, Amanda?
So we haven't actually did any videos or any collaborations, but we've actually Skyped in the past, and we have a lot of things in common because we're both nurses, and I have a riot with her, and we chat sometimes on the DMs and Twitter and stuff, and yeah, she's just, not only does she make it amazing videos, but she's really an amazing person too, which, you know, makes it just even more cool that, you know, she's just an awesome person on top of all of that. So yeah, check her out, Gray Area.
Well, what I love about Gray is that she's very good. She's got a good knowledge of mythology and symbolism, but she's, instead of making like 2-hour videos like me, she's making, you know, the shorter ones that do a lot better on YouTube. She's very popular, but she's constantly slipping in little bits of myth and symbolism, but never like, you know, dwelling too long on it in the way that I, of course, would. I'd spend like half an hour or something on this one thing. So I always love that, because I watch her videos and I'm like, oh, I get a little wink there. I'm like, okay, yeah, you know what's up. That's cool. So yeah, there's a lot to enjoy for myth heads in Gray's videos. And frequently I find her getting to some of the same ideas. Like, she's on to the idea that Azor Ahai is the Night's King, which, you know, there's a lot of people that have sort of sniffed at that, but that's definitely something that I've figured out through symbolism, and she came at it a different way. So yeah, well, I guess there it is, and I see the link appearing. Thank you, Jojo Lady Dane. So let's go ahead and tackle Colin's essay here. If you guys would be down, we can maybe take turns reading it, so it's not just me reading. And let me give you the link for it so you can pull it up. He actually has started a blog. It's really just a place for him to put his essays. I don't know that he's like trying to launch a giant enterprise, but you know how these things start. They always start as like dipping a toe in the water, and sooner or later you're wearing costumes and hosting live streams. So who knows? But here's the link. It's called the 8th Spoke WordPress page, and it's right there. And Painkiller and Amanda, you can grab it right out of the chat there and pull it up so you have the text. And it's cleverly called "We Should Fly Back," a reverse reading of Bran III. Pretty good stuff. So who would like to begin? Because I'd like to pop a cough drop in right now.
Okay, I will go ahead and begin.
Thank you.
Inspired by LML's last essay, I decided to take a look at another short chapter that's rich with symbolism, to see if 2 can be read backwards for hints and clues about some of the mysteries in A Song of Ice and Fire. Turns out this chapter works in the same way. I don't want to give too much away here at the beginning, so let's dig right in and go through this chapter from start to finish to get an idea of all the themes and symbolism in it. So, falling down. When you read the chapter forward, it's all about Bran's coming into power as a Greenseer. He's powerless at the start, falling, failing, frailing, but wakes up with his third eye open in the end. The chapter starts with Bran thinking. It seemed as though he had been falling for years. After a quick flashback to clay replica of himself being flung from a roof, moon destruction alert, we get a sense of his surroundings. The ground was far below him. He could barely make it out through the gray mist that whirled around him. But he could feel how fast he was falling, and he knew what was waiting for him down there. He's surrounded by mists, something that immediately reminds us of the others. The others are the sons of the mist, the milk snakes, the sons of the tree, the Ice Moon brothers, or pretty much any other name of the mountains of the moon you can pick. But a more explicit comparison to the others to the mist is made by Tormund. Tormund turned back. You know nothing. You killed a dead man, I heard. Man's killed 100. A man can fight the dead, but when their masters come, when the white mists rise up, how do you fight a mist crow? Shadows with teeth, air so cold it hurts to breathe, like a knife inside your chest. You don't know. You do not know. You cannot know. Can a sword cut cold? Somebody want to take the rest?
I can do it. The masters of the dead, the cold shadows, the mists burr. On top of that, it's also cold and dark where Bran is falling. It was cold here in the darkness. There was no sun, no stars, only the ground below coming up to smash him, and the gray mists and the whispering voice. Cold, dark, sunless, and starless. It feels like it's been going on for years. That sounds a lot like the way everyone's favorite toothless oracle, Old Nan, describes the long night. Oh,
So
my
here, hang on. Let's do the thing where if somebody's reading the main one, somebody else will do the quote. So it's has that good balance. So here, let me get the quote. Oh, my sweet summer child. Oh, hold on. Oh, my sweet summer child, Old Nan said quietly. What do you know of fear? Fear's for the winter, my little lord, when the snows fall 100 feet deep and the ice wind comes howling out of the north. Fear is for the long night, when the sun hides its face for years at a time, and little children are born and live and die all in darkness, while the dire wolves grow gaunt and hungry, and the white walkers move through the woods.
Bran too is afraid while falling after the three-eyed crow tells him he's going to die for realsies, and he should be, according to Old Nan's stories. He's experiencing the long night after all. Now that we know that Bran is in the middle of a symbolic long night, and he feels like that has been the case for years, let's quickly go back to the third paragraph of this chapter that we skipped about the clay replica of himself.
Maester Lewin made a little boy of clay, baked him till he was hard and brittle, dressed him in Bran's clothes, and flung him off a roof. Bran remembered the way he shattered. But I never fall, he said, falling.
Something getting baked and shattering is like a moon wandering too close to the sun, getting baked and cracking, especially when it's flung from a roof, where the roof represents the heavens, the sky, the celestial realm. Now we have a flashback to our long night causing moon disaster, right at the start of a chapter that already sounds like the long night. We also know another significant figure in the series that was surrounded by the cold of the long night for years and broke something important.
So as cold and death filled the earth, the last hero determined to seek out the children in the hopes that their ancient magics could win back what the armies of men had lost. He set out into the Deadlands with a sword, a horse, a dog, and a dozen companions. For years he searched, until he despaired of ever finding the children of the forest in their secret cities. One by one his friends died, and his horse, and finally even his dog, and his sword froze so hard the blade snapped when he tried to use it. And the others smelled the hot blood in him, and came silent on his trail, stalking him with packs of pale white spiders as big as hounds. Oh, wait, that was all supposed to be an Old Nan voice. Oh, I got to do it all again. No, I'm kidding. I won't do it again. That'd be too much. I won't be able to read afterwards, but carry on.
Could Bran be acting out the last hero's journey in this chapter? Well, let's get back to Bran 3 and find out, shall we? The next thing that happens there is that Bran meets the three-eyed crow, hands him some corn, and continues falling, with the ground getting closer and closer. He's now able to distinguish certain things below him.
Bran looked down. He could see mountains now, their peaks white with snow, and the silver thread of rivers in dark woods. He closed his eyes and began to cry.
He's still in the realm of the others, with snowy mountains, white peaks. Think of the icy spires we'll see later in this chapter, and silver rivers in dark woods. Let's jump back to the prologue of Game of Thrones for a quick second for a quote that clearly links this line to the others.
We should start back, Garrett urged as the woods began to grow dark around them.
The woods growing dark is a sign that the others are coming. In another essay, I've already linked silver to the others, so
By
I
the way,
won't
guys,
repeat
you
that
could
here.
find that other essay on Colin's WordPress there, just
Yes.
FYI. Carry on.
So I won't repeat that here, but just think of their reflective armor with patterns that ran like moonlight on water, and how the moon is often described as silver. The dark woods and icy symbols remind us that this part of Bran's dream is still taking part during the symbolic long night. The crow keeps telling Bran that he needs to fly and that he needs to look down. By doing so, Bran can see the whole realm and everyone in it, as George tells us. He sees Winterfell with Robb and Hodor, and the Weirwood brooding over its pool, lifting its eyes from the pool and staring at Bran. The Weirwood noticing Bran is like the old gods, acknowledging him, judging him, and deciding whether to help. By the fact that he learns to fly at the end of the chapter, I assume they deemed him worthy. Or perhaps he was the last one with enough green gift to replace the last Greenseer. It would give a whole new meaning to the phrase last hero, like they picked the boy with the crippled legs last in gym class. I digress. When Bran looks east from Winterfell, he sees his mother heading into a storm.
A storm was gathering ahead of them, a vast dark roaring lashed by lightning, but somehow they could not see it.
The storm his mother is heading towards represents the others and their army of undead. At the time of writing, we're still waiting for the Winds of Winter, which is another nickname we could give to the others. They bring the icy cold air, after all, like Tormund just told us, and Old Nan describes an ice wind that comes howling out of the north. I have an upcoming essay dedicated all to exploring the association of the others and wind and storms, since this is mentioned all throughout the series, but that'll still take a while to finish. The fact that they could not see the storm is a meta nod to the fact that all of Westeros is ignoring the upcoming invasion of the others into the realm.
And
The
if I
li-
could just if I could just jump in, I would just want to agree and say that yeah, a lightning storm that nobody can see coming. That's definitely the others, but carry on.
Mhm. The lightning mentioned here is also found as pale fire in the series, a form of burning cold like the others. It's also associated with them through Waymar's sword, because after it's been struck by the blade of an other, Will describes it as.
We found what was left of the sword a few feet away, the end splintered and twisted like a tree struck by lightning.
So if the lightning is the others, then the lashed by lightning could be seen as lashed by the others. And who gets lashed by the others, you ask? The undead army full of zombies under their control, of course. Since the others control their whites, they can be seen as their slaves, and slavers often control their slaves by whipping them. The fact that this storm getting lashed by lightning is vast and dark could hint at that a part of the army is made up of former Black Brothers of the Night's Watch, like Small Paul, Othor, Jafer, etc. But it works without that connection too. In the South, Bran sees more of his family.
And I also just want to say I do like that idea of lashing and lightning being the idea of like enslaving, because when the tree is struck by lightning, it becomes a slave essentially. So that kind of works for me. And when Waymar is essentially struck by the lightning swords of the others, he then becomes a slave too. So
And that would work with, especially with the Giscari, and also Pentos, who has a scourge as their like symbol for justice, and that is just basically uh, a thing that whips people.
And then the Night's Watch are also enslaved as well. So
Mhm.
here's the quote. So Colin's saying, in the south, Bran sees more of his family as we continue with the chapter. And it says, he looked south and saw the great blue-green rush of the trident. He saw his father pleading with the king, his face etched in grief. He saw Sansa crying herself to sleep at night, and he saw Arya watching in silence and holding her secrets hard in her heart. There were shadows all around them. One shadow was dark as ash, with the terrible face of a hound. Another was armored like the sun, golden and beautiful. Over them both loomed a giant in armor made of stone, but when he opened his visor, there was nothing inside but darkness and thick black blood.
In terms of the long night and Bran's last hero journey to save the world, seeing his family and their hardships is like the companions he's lost. Apart from Robb, Lewin, and Hodor, all of his loved ones that he sees are beyond his reach, for now, lost to him. Arya's hard heart ties in nicely with Lady Stoneheart in the roles of Mercy and Cat. She'll play later too, for what it's worth here. It says there were shadows all around them, and a giant with darkness and thick black blood. The others are referred to as pale shadows. So if Bran hasn't lost his family to the others in the darkness, symbolically, it's about to happen. After this, Bran takes a quick look further east across to Essos before heading north to the Wall and beyond.
Finally, he looked north. He saw the walls shining like blue crystal, and his bastard brother Jon sleeping alone in a cold bed, his skin growing pale and hard as the memory of all warmth fled from him. And he looked past the wall, past endless forest cloaked in snow, past the frozen shore and the great blue-white rivers of ice, and the dead plains where nothing grew or lived. North and north and north he looked to the curtain of light at the end of the world, and then beyond that curtain he looked deep into the heart of winter, and then he cried out, afraid, as the heat of his tears burned on his cheeks. All right, let's flip it around, Painkiller. I'll start reading. And Amanda, I'm letting you off the hook. You're trying to read from your phone. It looks very difficult. So I'm going to, I appreciate the valiant effort, but yeah, yeah, exactly. Yeah, I'll let you off the hook. If you want to get some of the book quotes in, that's cool. But yeah, there you go. Gregory Namuth says, gotta go. I'll finish this tomorrow. Thanks, man. You on next week? Yeah, I'm every week, Greg. I'm here every week for you, buddy. Like I said, it's either going to be, it might be on the Between Two Weirwoods channel next week. If it's the gray area one, it will be on the Between Two Weirwoods channel. So make sure that you are subscribed to the Between Two Weirwoods YouTube channel, which has a number 2 in the middle of the words between and Weirwoods. And that's how you find it. In any case, continuing with the essay. So here, Bran sees his brother, a member of the Night's Watch, dying, or something close to dying at least. Another comparison gone. This is like the last hero seeing all of his friends die, essentially. Bran's looking around, seeing his family members that are either going to die or facing death. He sees Jon freezing. And then when he looks into the heart of winter, he sees terrible things.
There was nothing below him. There was nothing below him now but snow and cold and death, a frozen wasteland where jagged blue white spires of ice waited to embrace him. They flew up at him like spears. He saw the bones of 1,000 other dreamers impaled upon their points. He was desperately afraid.
So still falling, still failing to fly, he sees a landscape of blue-white spires of ice with people, dreamers, impaled on them. Firstly, these blue-white icy spires are similar to the swords of the others, with their pale blue coloring and icy symbolism. I've talked about that at length before, and again, this is Colin's other essay on his WordPress page, as have others, no pun intended, so no need to repeat that. Waymar, this is great, I love this. Waymar, a failed last hero figure, dies through the swords of the others. And here, the last hero figure, Bran, is about to die because of a similar type of icy spikes, just like Waymar. Secondly, however, we also know that another type of object that loves to impale dreamers is Weirwood roots. Think of Bloodraven and the other seers in his network of caves being impaled on the Weirwood roots like Odin on his tree. To me, this line about icy spires in the heart of winter sounds a lot like an icy version of the Weirwood net. We've also theorized before that there is a division in the Weirwood net between a domain for the others and a domain for the Greenseers, kind of like the wall is in the real world division. And this is just another clue about that. And I would add, guys, that Waymar was pierced with one of those sword shards that comes from the struck by lightning tree sword. So, and I compared that as an icy version of the Weirwood root through the eye. So Colin's picking up on the exact same idea here, essentially. Everything Bran describes between the wall and the heart of winter is the domain of the others, a place mankind should stay out of. Forest cloaked in snow again tells us about the trees, weirwoods turning to ice, like the ice spires could actually be frozen weirwoods. Who knows? If LML's moon meteor theory is right, yeah, maybe, then a magical moon meteor landing inside a grove of weirwoods could have turned part of the weirwood net and its associated greenseers into the others. And I would say that's true on a symbolic level, even if it's not literally true. I've put that forward, that idea that the moon meteors would like to poison Westeros the same way that Ashai is poisoned, but the weirwoods are somehow like transmuting and mitigating and containing that poison. But part of that fallout might be the other. So picking back up with Colin's essay, it says Bran sees great blue-white rivers of ice and the dead plains where nothing grew or lived. The blue-white coloring is a trademark of the others with their pale blue swords, their lightning associations, and their pale-skinned slave whites with burning blue eyes. Since they control the dead, their domain should hold plains where nothing grows or lived. This takes me back to the idea that the wall was built by the others to keep mankind out of their frozen domain up north. So after Bran is scared shitless of this icy danger, he remembers his father's words to him about being brave and flies. And as he does so, he clears away the darkness. Check this out.
Wings.
Oh. Go ahead.
Okay. Wings unseen drank the wind and filled and pulled him upward. The terrible needles of ice receded below him. The sky opened up above.
He did it. He ended the long night, the symbolic long night, in this coma dream anyway. The sky opens up, meaning the darkness is ending and the ice receding. Then he wakes up in Winterfell to find a serving woman dropping a basin of water and his wolf leaping onto his bed.
A pair of yellow eyes looked into his own, shining like the sun. His name is Summer, he said.
Summer and the sun are here. Winter and its darkness is gone. Last hero Bran has saved the day. I really love this because we always talk about like, how do you clear away the long night? Well, we're still not sure, but we know a Greenseer just did it. He like cleared the skies. So that's pretty cool. It shows you that there is some method or instrument of clearing away all that smoke. I mean, maybe it's just wind, I guess. We need a windy Greenseer. Well, hey, wait a minute. When Vermeer dies, he goes into Thistle, goes into the Weirwood, but then he's like a wind. He's born on the breeze, and the children on Cold Hands' elk even like look up at the passing breeze. So maybe that's it. Maybe the Greenseer needs to die and just like turn into the wind and just like blow away all the smoke. That would be cool. Ravenous Reader, are you watching? Are you in the chat? I don't think she is, but I think she'll like that idea. That would make a certain amount of sense. Okay, I'm vamping. Let's go.
Actually, let me add one thing just because there is, of course, Nissa. There's a lot of Greenseer stuff associated with, our Weirwood goddess. And I had found some connections between Nissa and the tale of the Little Mermaid, the Hans Christian Andersen version. And one of the things that actually happened in the Hans Christian Andersen version is she became one of the spirits of the wind at the very final end. And
you don't fucking say.
Yes, yeah, she became a spirit of the wind. And in The Tempest, which is a really cool Shakespeare play, there's this character named Ariel, who is also a spirit that was trapped inside a tree. And Ariel was also a spirit of the wind. So it's interesting there too.
Spirits of the air.
Yes. Yeah.
Wow, that's cool. I feel like that's got potential. And of course, horns make wind. The others are very windy, so maybe you need wind to fight wind. We know Euron is like causing the favorable winds by performing blood sacrifice. So there you go. We're always talking about ice and fire and water, but maybe we need to pay more attention to air and wind.
No, I mentioned the connection between Greenseers and the control of the wind in my essay on Garth and the Great King, and
Sorry,
there's
the
it's
rest of
definitely
us
there.
have been ignoring the wind, and Amanda has been paying
I
attention to it.
just
Well,
saying.
Yeah, no, I
Just-
agree with her
just
because
saying.
in the Summer Islands, the wind makes the stones sing, and it tells people what to do.
Oh, that's true.
Yeah, and way before me, Evita also on Westeros.org, Evita MFGS, I think, she did
She's
a lot of
awesome, by
stuff
the
with
way.
Bran and the Wind and Greenseer control of the wind. So it's a thing. It is.
Can you actually elaborate on that for like 60 seconds or so?
Yeah. Okay. So just take for instance the concept of the storm god. A storm god has, you would think that he would have control of the wind. When you look at the Greenseers, the way that they communicate is through the trees and the wind. When there's a conversation with Bran and Osha, and he's asking, how do I listen to the gods? And she's just like, look around, listen, open up your ears. And Bran responds, it's just the wind. And Osha responds, who do you think controls the wind, if not the gods? And so it's right there. Osha's telling us right there what we need to know about that connection. And you even see it as soon as the prologue. It's not just the trees that are trying to keep Waymar from going forward. It's also the wind. The wind is actually into his face, and he's going into the wind, and it's going against him. So it's a thing. Check it out.
Cool. And real quick, Jojo Lady Dane is asking where she can find the episode where I've got all the God's Eye explanation. And I actually haven't done a proper mythical astronomy God's Eye episode. It's sort of leaked into a bunch of them. But the best concentrated God's Eye stuff is actually in the cave paintings live stream that I did on the History of Westeros channel, where we went super nerdy on all those all that cave art that was in the Dragonstone cave on the TV show a couple seasons ago, because it had a lot of God's Eye symbols. And we did a bunch of visuals too. So I even explained the God's Eye with like all the images, and it's a really fun one. That's actually on History of Westeros's channel, and it's called Cave Paintings with LML or something like that. So that's where you can find that.
You can also find some in your Baleful Bard episode with Baylor of the Evil Eye as well.
Oh yeah, okay. That's probably the other good one. Thank you, Amanda. Better than me. I've written a lot of stuff, forgotten more stuff.
You have written a lot of stuff. So
I was looking back on it the other day. I was scrolling through my table of contents, and I just kept scrolling and scrolling, and I was like, damn, dude. Damn. Yeah, piled up. But thanks to all you guys. So enabling it to happen. So I hope you like it. All right, let's pick back up with the essay here. So Bran wakes up, and we've got the warm bath and summer and all those summer symbols after Bran wakes up and saves the day. So in the forward direction, this chapter is all about Bran as a last hero figure. It starts with him in a long night scenario, surrounded by mists and darkness, falling, failing. After traveling south, east, west, a long last hero's journey that feels like it's lasting for years, during which he sees loss, grief, hardship, and the apparent death of his loved ones. Then he heads north into the heart of winter. When all seems lost and he appears to crash into the ground, just before he's defeated and impaled on the ice spires of the others like Waymar, he gets help from a Greenseer and flies. He opens up his third eye and wakes up, ending the long night, to find that summer has arrived. Basically, Bran the Last Hero has used the magic of the Children of the Forest and the Greenseers to end the long night and declare summer. But what happens when we press reverse and play all of this backwards? We find a whole nother story. Check it out. All right, Painkiller, will you take another turn real quick?
Sure. Falling up. When we press the rewind button at the end of this chapter, the order and the direction of the events will change direction. Up becomes down, life becomes death, and gaining becomes losing. To quickly summarize what happened in the forwards reading, Bran is surrounded by darkness and mists, representing the long night. Bran has a meet and feed with a Greenseer, three-eyed crow. Bran travels all across the realm, sees Jon die, symbolically loses his companions. Bran travels to the heart of winter. Bran learns to fly. Bran opens his eyes, ends the night, and finds summer. Instead of coming into his powers, we read the chapter backwards. We see Bran losing his touch with the old gods. Instead of changing the long night into summer, he now loses summer and ends up in the darkness of the long night. Instead of traveling towards the heart of winter, he now starts his journey from that cold, dead place. In reverse, we start with summer and his warmth, when all is well during the daytime in Winterfell. But then summer and his eyes that shine like the sun disappear from Bran's view. A serving woman shatters a water basin in a room high in one of Winterfell's towers, and Bran closes his eyes to sleep like the start of the night. Wait, something shattering in a tower at the start of the night? That sounds a lot like a moon shattering in the sky and causing the long night, right? The tops of towers are often symbolic of the celestial realm, so it would fit. The water basin could represent the swamps at the neck or the arm of Dorne that shattered and splashed water tsunamis everywhere. To be fair, if we were consistent in reversing the events, this would actually have to be a shattered water basin getting mended in the hands of the serving woman. If the basin represents the moon, which we see reflected on bodies of water quite often throughout the series, this could represent the resurrection of moon goddess Nissa Nissa. But I somehow like the first explanation better.
Okay, so let me cut in here to say that the basin of water is definitely a moon symbol. Think of the moon pool in Bravos. It's the same idea, like the silver sea. The water is a mirror, and it's a round mirror. So that's definitely the moon. It's probably the ice moon. And when Colin talks about, if you play this in reverse, it's a shattered bowl of water and bowl sort of reforming. That reminds me a lot of Waymar reforming his sword from all the sword fragments. And the shattered sword is the meteor shower in the forwards reading. And so what he's doing in the reverse reading is picking up moon meteor fragments and forging them into a sword, which makes perfect sense, right? And so that's what I think is happening here. We have this broken moon symbol coming back together as this, what turns out to be evil Greenseer, kind of wakes up. So he's reforging a sword, I think, with this bowl. But go ahead and carry on.
Would that go with Dany bathing in the pool of in the shadow of the mountain with the shattering and reshattering and all of
reforming,
that?
Yes.
Reforming,
the image of the moon, it says shattering and reforming. Exactly right. And it's the same thing when Aeron Damphair says, when the moon has drowned and come again. It's a rebirth of the moon, which can be the rebirth of the moon goddess. It can also be making Lightbringer from the corpse of the moon, essentially. And it's just like Nissa Nissa's soul and spirit and energy went into Lightbringer, the moon meteors go into Lightbringer. So that's what's going on here.
And it could go for the first forging of Lightbringer. I mean, that was a water, right? That he used water to temper the sword, but then it shattered again, and he had to pick up the pieces and reforge it.
Yeah, those 3 forgings always give me a headache, but yeah, that could be related.
Yeah.
Grumble. So
exactly.
Right,
anyway, now that Bran is asleep, he's flying with his third eye open right from the start of this symbolic long night. All throughout Bran's arch flying is the equivalent of obtaining green seeing abilities. Think of the line, "You will never walk again, Bran, but you will fly." So here we have a Greenseer at the start of the long night, basically going into the Weirwood net and into his green dreams with his regular eyes closed and his third eye open. And while the moment where Bran learns how to fly in the forwards version should equate to forgetting how to fly in this backwards reading, that doesn't mean he leaves the net or loses this ability here. When played in reverse, Bran is actually falling up, which already looks like flying, but is also something they tend to do under the sea, as Patchface describes.
Patchface sprawled half on top of him, Motley Fool's face pressed close to his own. He had lost his tin helm with its antlers and bells. Under the sea, you fall up, he declared. I know. Oh. Giggling, the fool rolled off, bounded to his feet, and did a little dance. And yes, I keep that right by my computer, ready to go at all times. So carry on if you can.
All right. Thank you, LML. And thanks to Ravenous Reader's brilliant Under the Sea wordplay. We know that this Under the Sea is actually describing the Weirwood net. Upward falling Bran is still in there, still in the sea. That is the Weirwood net. I've theorized somewhere that the creepy fool is actually talking from the perspective of the others. So it would make sense if Bran would now be inhabiting a part of the Weirwood net that belongs to the others. And indeed, Bran's upward falls start from the heart of winter, surrounded by those icy spires that could be frozen Weirwoods, with thousands of other dreamers impaled on them like icy Weirwood roots. In this dream, we learn that this place lies beyond the curtain of light at the end of the world. So this enforces the idea that there is a division between the heart of winter and the rest. We actually see the same idea at the end of the chapter as he wakes up.
The crow opened its beak and cawed at him, a shrill scream of fear, and the gray mist shuddered and swirled around him and ripped away like a veil, and he saw the crow was really a woman. I'll go ahead and take over. We'll flip it around again. So when reading this part forwards, it's Bran ripping away the curtain of light, that veil of tears between life and death. He becomes an immortal Greenseer through the Weirwood net, wings spread and third eye open. In reverse, he puts it in place, like he's the one to divide the Weirwood net into the part of the Greenseers and the part of the others. It could have well happened through the sacrifice of Nissa Nissa, since there is a shrill scream of fear and a shudder at the same time. Shuddering is something we see in other places where Nissa Nissa and her scream of agony and ecstasy are depicted.
The red priestess shuddered. Blood trickled down her thigh, black and smoking. The fire was inside her, in agony and ecstasy, filling her, searing her, transforming her.
I don't assume, and I being Colin, of course, Colin Longstrider, Wandering Spoke of the Eighth Wheel. If you're tuning in late, we are reading Colin's essay because it is very good.
And we summoned a Ravenous Reader, too.
We did. I see that, yes. Hello, princess. Anyways, from one princess to another princess. Painkiller Jane says hello. In any case, I don't assume the servants at Winterfell hate Bran, so the serving woman uttering this initial scream of fear is most likely ecstatic that he's awake again, as she quickly runs away to tell the rest of the castle. That means that she's both afraid and ecstatic in rapid succession. So that's agony and ecstasy. That's a very good way to depict it. George frequently does the agony and ecstasy thing that way by giving you like a scream of joy or something like that. So to summarize what we've seen so far, we see a Greenseer entering or creating a frozen part of the Weirwood net and starting the long night. The first other, perhaps? Well, let's see what happens next as we travel further backwards. Now that he's started the long night, it's time for Bran to invade the realms of men, and we see him travel to the Wall, east to Essos, south to the Trident, etc., instead of north like we did in the forwards reading. That's pretty much the story of the invasion of the others, since there are legends about the long night scattered all across Planetos. His first stop is the Wall, where he sees his brother Jon. Though we really don't see Bran losing all of his companions in the forwards last hero journey, we do see him lose a brother of the Night's Watch when his brother Jon's body seems to die. Well, what's the reverse of having your companions die? Having them resurrected, of course. That's the, pausing his essay. That's, of course, the whole point of the Green Zombies story and the way that it overlays with Waymar's story is that, the people that died then come back to life. So that makes sense to me. So in reverse order, we could see the cold corpse of Jon Snow coming back to life at the Wall. Wait, a resurrected corpse of a Night's Watchman at the Wall? Well, first of all, that sounds a lot like Othor and Jafer Flowers, two other whited Night's Watchmen at the Wall who were under control of the others and attacked the living. Stretching this idea a bit, we could suggest that a resurrected Jon, in this case, is symbolically like a white two bound to the others. Remember, we're reading this backwards for symbolism. I'm not saying that Jon will be like this and wins when it comes out in 2125. Colin, shame on you. No wins that wins will take forever jokes. I will not have your cynicism. That's all right. Fine, whatever. And by the way, remember that one of the ideas of that reverse prologue is that the others would like to make Jon a new Night's King. So it's possible that they will get control of him for a time and then relinquish it, or it's possible Jon will simply have to like somehow embrace the others at the end in order to pacify them. There's lots of ways that this could happen where Jon is sort of other-like. And if nothing else, he's at least the good other. So in any case, going back to Colin's essay, all of this is starting to sound a lot like a certain historical figure we know of that also enslaved the Night's Watch, worshipped the others, and loved corpses.
He brought her back to the Night Fort and proclaimed her a queen and himself a king. And with strange sorceries, he bound his sworn brothers to his will. For 13 years they had ruled, Night's King and his corpse queen, till finally the Stark of Winterfell and Jormungand of the Wildlings had joined to free the Watch from bondage. After his fall, when it was found he had been sacrificing to the others, all records of the Night's King had been destroyed, his very name forbidden.
I would suggest that Bran's backward dream is actually the story about Night's King and the rise of the others. The first half of the backwards retelling was all about the others coming from the Weirwood net and traveling south to the Wall. I'd like to show that with the clues from the second half, we can hang the Night's King archetype on backwards Bran too. This could be interpreted in two ways, I reckon. First, we could picture Night's King as an other himself, traveling down from the heart of winter and taking control of the Night's Watch, binding them to his will, dead or not, and using them to invade the rest of the world. I tend to lean more towards a second option. Here, the others come south towards the Wall, where they seduce the Lord's commander of the Night's Watch to join their story, like the story Old Nan tells us, and then use him and his men, probably dead, to further that cause. In terms of the symbolism, we can say that Night's King then becomes equivalent to the others, and so would Bran. After all, we're talking about symbolism and archetypes, not actual physical people per se. In the last part of this essay, I'm going to do just that, combining both the invading other symbolism and Night's King symbolism onto Bran. And let me just pause and say that I tend to think it's actually the first interpretation, Colin, where it's Bran is like the Night King, essentially raising the Watch and enslaving them. But who knows? We'll see. Or just raising the army of the dead. But in any case, from the Wall, backwards Bran travels east and south, where he sees people fleeing from the lightning storm that is the others and the invasion. The ship his mother on in the forwards reading is traveling towards the storm, but in the reverse reading, now it's traveling away from the storm instead of towards it. So everything is reversed. And essentially, the long night is in full effect and people are running from the others. That makes sense. Next up are the two lines about the Weirwood in Winterfell and the Godswood. In reverse, we get the Weirwood staring at Bran and then averting its eyes and staring back at its own reflection. The Weirwood averting its eyes from Bran could be acknowledgement of him abandoning the old gods, and vice versa. And that, again, makes sense. As a matter of fact, it could tell us that Bran has left the original Weirwood net, that it's been closed off behind him, and he's now become a full other. A similar thing would have happened to Night's King. As a brother of the Watch, he would have sworn his oath to the Weirwoods, would have worshipped the old gods. Upon his defeat, we are told that they found out he was actually worshiping the others, to the icy mists, meaning he would have forsaken the trees, abandoned his gods, like Bran did here, and like the Bloodstone Emperor did. I'm mad at it. Yeah, and I was going to pipe in, like, that's kind of the Azor Ahai thing, right? He goes against the gods. So now, while we're back here at Winterfell, we see his brother Robb practicing with real steel, and Hodor, the simple giant, carrying an anvil. You guys are going to love this, Amanda and Painkiller Jane. Check this out, because we talked about a lot of this stuff that he's about to mention. So remember what Old Nan said about the defeat of the Night's King. Night's King was a Stark defeated by another Stark, the Stark of Winterfell and the brother to the Night's King, to be precise. What if Robb is symbolizing Brandon the Breaker here, practicing with real steel, like dragon steel, to defeat Night's King? He's the only Stark we see in actual Winterfell in this dream, and he's Bran's brother. So he definitely fits the bill. And of course, Robb definitely has some Azor Ahai symbolism, especially when Theon sees dead Robb in the dream, and him and Ghost walk into the hall with wounds and burning eyes and stuff. That's pretty. In any case, the Stark of old, Brandon the Breaker, was joined by Jormungand, a wildling from north of the Wall. And together they would have sandwiched Night's King at the Wall. George describes this battle technique in many places, and refers to it as the hammer and the anvil. And who do we see carrying an anvil in Bran's vision? Hodor, the simple giant. I realize it's a bit of a stretch. Actually, Colin, it's not a stretch at all. Giants live north of the wall and joined Mance's army of wildlings in the main storyline too. So we could count Hodor, the simple giant, as a wildling. Yeah, and Hodor, he definitely could represent Jormungand. That makes a ton of sense to me. And Jormungand has a lot of giant symbolism, and the horn wakes giants in the earth. So on and on and on. Even Jormungand's horn is featured somewhat in the form of the bronze tube Maester Luwin uses when he's playing the part of a starry lookout. That's actually really interesting. The whole idea of the telescope as a horn, because the horn has to do with the stars and dragons and all that shit. But in any case, Colin says, I see a lot of similarities between the story of the last hero receiving help from the children of the forest to defeat the others, and the Stark of Winterfell getting help from the wildlings north of the wall to defeat Night's King. Oh, that kind of makes sense, actually. In both cases, a Stark, pretty sure the last hero was a Stark too, gets help from creatures that nowadays, at least, live north of the wall to defeat creatures with icy death symbolism, and people whom they are tied to their will. For all we know, it's the same story told in different ways, evolving through the ages. After losing touch with the old, actually, Painkiller, you want to take over here?
After losing touch with the old gods and losing sight of Winterfell, Bran keeps on falling up until he also loses sight of the three-eyed crow, the last Greenseer, and his absolute last line to the Weirwoods. He is surrounded by mists and darkness. It's almost like the theory about Euron being a former protege of the three-eyed crow that has turned to the dark side, right? I've mentioned before in another essay that I think the others coming out of the Weirwood net are like a defense mechanism gone haywire, and I'm probably not the only one to think this. The Weirwood turning away from Bran in this reverse reading supports that. The others have lost their touch with the Greenseers and have become the enemy of all living things, including the trees. The help the last hero receives from the children of the forest to defeat them sounds like creators trying to right their own wrong. And yes, I believe the children are partly responsible for the creation of the others in one way or another. The phrase White Walkers of the Woods is to me pretty clear about the others um, that have their origin in the same type of magic as the children, the Greenseers and their trees. I absolutely agree with that.
Yeah,
Honestly, yeah. I mean, remember the quote that I sent you, that we were talking about on Twitter earlier, where the squires who are children make all these snowmen and make all these commanders, and then a storm comes, darkness, mist, all this blowing wind comes and makes them all these giant monsters.
Totally. Yeah, we're all on the same page here for sure.
We're almost at the start. Old Nan tells us that the Night's King is a man without fear.
He had been the third. Or Amanda, you want to get in? Do you have it up?
I do. He had been the 13th man to lead the Night's Watch, she said, a warrior who knew no fear. And that was the fault in him, she would add, for all men must know fear.
As we reach the beginning of the chapter, we reach the point where, in the forwards version, Bran still thinks it's a dream. He tells the crow that he'll wake up when he hits the ground, showing us he's not afraid. Later, when he sees the Heart of Winter and is told he'll die when he hits the ground, he does get afraid. So in the backwards reading, Bran actually loses that fear. Give him another trait of the Night's King archetype. To inverse some of the important items from the list of the beginning of this section, Bran loses summer, starts his night by closing his eyes. Bran flies, starting from the heart of winter. Bran sees Jon coming back to life at the wall. Bran loses touch with the old gods, the Weirwood, and the Greenseers, becomes unafraid. Bran is surrounded by darkness and mist, the long night. This is pretty much the story of a person causing the long night as he goes into the Weirwood net, corrupting it and losing touch with the original inhabitants and intents of that net. of a person then invading the realms of men with icy mists and resurrected corpses, bringing cold and darkness. Who that person could be? Perhaps it's the Bloodstone Emperor, Azor Ahai we love to talk about, who might have started the Weirwood net by sacrificing Nissa Nissa, who might have corrupted that same net by following her in, perhaps splitting off a section that turned to ice, sprouting forth a resurrected corpse queen, nice Nissa Nissa, and it's spelled Nice A, Ice A, that helped enslave the Night's Watch. I guess we'll have to keep digging and hope we'll ever find definitive answers. Lastly, I would like to say that it would actually fit that a part of Bran symbolically represents Night's King, since according to Old Nan, Night's King was a Stark named Brandon, who sleeps in the same room as Bran is dreaming this dream in this chapter. And Old Nan's word is truth, of course.
He was a Stark, the brother of the man who brought him down. She always pinched Bran on the nose then. He would never forget it. He was a Stark of Winterfell, and who can say? Mayhaps his name was Brandon. Mayhaps he slept in this very bed, in this very room.
Now that we're all the way back at the beginning of the chapter, when there is no sun, no stars, only cold, darkness, Bran has become the Night's King, ready to rule his long night.
Night's King was only a man by light of day, Old Nan would say, but the night was his to rule, and it's getting dark.
So there you go, Colin. Good job, buddy.
Woo!
Officially contributed
well
to the
done.
mythical astronomy canon, such as it is. Fire the cannons. So pretty cool. You can see why I was excited and thought it would be appropriate to read this. A lot of tie-ins to the messages that we found in the reverse reading of the Waymar prologue. And we've already mentioned half of these ideas already, discussing the Waymar prologue, so that you can see how tied in it is. It's all about the corruption of the Weirwood net. I thought the idea of him creating the veil was really compelling, because again, we've seen this partition idea. We know it should happen, with the invasion of the Weirwoods, and essentially the veil means like part of the Weirwood net is dying. It's freezing. In the Varamir Sixskins prologue, we see a living model of the Weirwoods being frozen, and it happens right before he this is the Weirwood tree that he sees. So check this out. In fact, oh my God, this is the one where he looks up and sees the night white as death and sees a vision of the others in the sky, basically. So check this out. When Varamir pushed at it, the snow crumbled and gave way, still soft and wet outside. He's pushing at the door to the tent. Outside, the night was as white as death. Pale, thin clouds danced attendance on a silver moon, while 1,000 stars watched coldly. He could see the humped shapes of other huts, buried beneath drifts of snow, and beyond them the pale shadow of a Weirwood armored in ice. To the south and west, the hills were a vast white wilderness where nothing moved except the blowing snow. So a pale shadow, that's the term used to describe an other, and others are armored in ice. So this is a Weirwood turning into an other. And this is happening right as the army of the dead is marching into town. And it's happening as we've got pale, thin clouds dancing in the sky with cold stars. And I pointed out that that's basically the portrait of an other as a young man, or the dancing, thin, pale clouds are the others who danced with Waymar. And the stars are simply their eyes, and they're watching coldly, and they're attending the silver moon. The silver moon is like the night's queen, or like the ice moon that they worship here. So you've got this portrait of the others, and then we see a pale Weirwood armored in ice. And then we're going to get what? We're going to get a Night's King killing a Nissa Nissa and then turning into a cold one-eyed wolf and shit. So, yeah. There you go.
Terrifying.
What's that?
It's terrifying. It actually is. Like this whole thing, just reading it backwards, you're like, oh crap, this is actually a very terrifying story that's going on. Much much worse than what Bran leads us to believe.
Yeah, this again, good job, Colin. This is a good one. Definitely bearing some fruit. And I see a lot of applause in the chat here for Colin. So very, very cool. Very cool. Yeah, so this really does, you've got I like the shattering bowl reforming, like a reforming moon. And then he's sort of going into this dream world. He's this time, he's coming from the heart of winter, and then sort of clouding the land, and then going out into all the land, and like his mom's running away from the storm and stuff. Like, it's great. That's great. I love it. Lots of fun. So thanks so much, Colin, for contributing. Amanda, Painkiller, let me turn it over to you for any thoughts on any of that.
Amanda. I think she's typing.
Oh no, so I really enjoyed it. I think that he had some really good analysis, and I liked I liked pretty much the whole thing. I'm beginning to think that all of the prologues, might be showing us that if we're seeing a pattern here. So I'm kind of interested to see not only the prologues, but also I think we have an epilogue as well. I'm wondering if we need to, what we need to do with the order of something that starts at the end, as like the epilogue, because we do have a bunch of children killing somebody at the very end. So that's kind of interesting. That's kind of got my the wires in my brain kind of firing at the moment, is that epilogue and how that should be.
Oh, yeah, that would be like the children resurrecting somebody, wouldn't it?
Yeah. So I'm kind of interested to look at that too. So that's cool. Very cool.
Resurrecting a man who lives in the shadow of his own brother, because that's the big thing about him, is that he always lived in the shadow of Tywin. So that might be a Bloodstone Emperor Azor Ahai thing.
Nice. I like that.
Jojo Lady Dane says, I'd like someone to do the Clash prologue with Crescent and Mel. So actually, Colin is thinking about doing that one next, because it would be like Melisandre resurrecting Crescent, which could very well foreshadow Jon's resurrection. And they're inside of a dragon, a frozen stone dragon. They would be resurrecting Crescent, and then he would be leaving to go up to the tower and observe the comet with some gargoyles. So that sounds like it might make a lot of sense. That sounds like Jon waking up as the dragon locked in ice and walking out of the dragon's maw. So yeah, check everybody. Once again, let me just drop this link one more time to Colin's. Go ahead and talk, either one of you guys. I'm just going to drop Colin's link in the chat. So
on your thing about the epilogue, I wonder how the Storm of Swords epilogue would go with Merritt Frey backwards. Type of situation.
In Old Stones too.
Yeah,
that's in Old Stones.
Oh, right. So that'd be Stoneheart taking somebody off the gallows and resurrecting them, and then they'd walk to. Okay, yeah, we'll have to take a look at that one. Yeah, prologues and epilogues seem like the obvious ones to try, for sure.
Yeah, and there's a lot of lightning, because he has that the issue with his head pain and headaches and kind of blacking out and drinking, and he's always talking about like the lightning and the thunder in his head and everything. So that'd be kind of cool to read.
I've done that one forwards before.
Yeah.
What's that one?
And his I love that his name is Merritt. As in MERIT, and then he's always like, I have bad luck, and he's every time he's talking about doing things, he doesn't win them by his own merit. He's always like, oh, I have bad luck, and that's why it messes up everything that I try to do correctly.
All right, okay, that's funny. Yeah, George loves using names like that, for sure. For sure. So this is Mythical Astronomy is an interactive community, guys. So feel free to take this principle and do your own homework and try to read some of these chapters and identify the basic pattern that's happening and then think about if it makes sense going backwards, especially when you hear talk in a chapter about reversing course or starting back or going back to some place that you went before, anything like that. That's the tip off clue. So this definitely seems like a Pandora's box here. So like the more these turn up, the more sure you are that George is doing things this way. So
Are we going to talk about Nissa Nissa and the
I put my
Corpse
antlers
Queen?
on backwards, someone says. Oh, that's funny. Thank you. Well, that's appropriate, I guess, right? I'm sorry, what'd you say, Painkiller?
I was going to say, are we going to talk about Nissa Nissa and the connection here with the Corpse Queen situation?
Yeah, I guess so.
we never
I'm
did
looking
talk
at-
about that.
Yeah, we didn't even get to it too much. We are getting ready to wrap up here shortly because I know Amanda needs to go. But let's go ahead and talk about that. So yeah, fire away, either one of you guys.
Do you want to start?
I don't know. Honestly, for me, I've always thought they were like Lady Stoneheart. I always thought that was like Nissa Nissa and then the Corpse Queen coming back to life. That's how I always saw it. But I could be wrong.
Okay. I tend to question the corpse portion of Nissa Nissa, or at least the Night's Queen.
Yeah, me
She
too.
does. I tend to question if she was really a corpse or a White Walker or what have you. It talks about how she had very pale skin, and I'm wondering, there's a lot of stuff with the Valyrians with very pale skin, and also Greenseers with albinism. It's kind of a thing, and so I'm wondering if she's just a very pale woman, or Children of the Forest. I'm just wondering if she was just very pale. But yeah. But one thing that I do want to mention is in the Hugor of the Hill myth, we have this woman, and she's described with these eyes like deep blue pools, and it's a very kind of striking description. And then we've also learned, I had a video on kind of this Nissa Nissa monomyth. It's called The Great King's Mermaid Wife, and it shows, at least I tried to show, how this woman is possibly a chaste woman or an abducted woman. And in the myth of the Night's King and the Night's Queen, we have a man who's chasing this woman, and he caught her and he loved her, and she had like eyes as blue as stars. And so we get this blue eyes, we get this abducted woman, we get this really, really strong Nissa Nissa archetype. And so I think that it's very possible that we have another version of this myth here. I could be wrong about it, but I think it's quite possible. There's I've been reading about Deidre in Celtic myth, and she's kind of like a Helen analog. She was the most beautiful woman in the world, and her eyes were described as both deep blue pools and also as eyes like blue stars. And so I'm kind of reading about her at the moment, but she's kind of like an abducted woman analog, and I think that that's what our Night's Queen is actually doing, is playing on those archetypes. So.
And obviously you guys see why I chose this banner today.
Yes.
What I love about this banner is that the eyes are actually purple. The rest of it's blue. I don't know if you could tell, but the eyes are actually purple. So it's pretty fun. It's like a purple-eyed Night's Queen looking out over a frozen forest. I was like, bye, bye, bye. But yeah, I mean, it's there's definitely a connection. I'm just down to hashing out like what exactly it was. Was it some part of Nissa Nissa's spirit inside the Weirwoods, either escaping or being forced back out? Was it Azor Ahai trying to raise the corpse of his lost love? Was it, we've also got this idea of like body snatching. What if you have the spirit of Nissa Nissa coming out and basically taking control of some sort of ice golem body or something else. So it looks like Amanda's talking to one of her kids, I think. She's got that cute mom face going on right now. Cool. Well, so yeah. I definitely, I'm hoping to get down to figuring this out as we look at more Sansa stuff in the Eyrie, because Sansa is definitely doing that fire to ice transformation. Also, Cersei is the other one we need to study, because not only does she have obvious Ice Queen symbolism, she looks like a statue carved from ice, or she has a cold, icy look sometimes, even though mostly she's like a fiery Nissa Nissa Catwoman figure. But then when she gets locked in the Sept of Baelor,
And skinned.
she gets her golden hair cut off. That's like losing her fire. She's imprisoned and locked in ice. And after she comes out of that, I expect to see her doing like Night's Queen things, and she's got Gregor, this monstrous, white knight. Amanda, go ahead.
And she's also losing her crown, because I think that her hair was also called her crowning glory.
Mm-hmm.
So she's also possibly losing her crown there too.
So those are the two things we got to study, I think, to be able to figure this out, is Sansa and Cersei. And I think that might help us do it. But there's some sort of transformation that goes on, and it's just a matter of like, in what sense is the corpse queen Nissa Nissa? But I, like you, Amanda, do question the idea that she was actually a corpse. I really like Durin Durrandon's theory that she was more like an icy version of Melisandre. Melisandre is sort of undead in that she's extended her natural lifespan. We don't really know if she's undergone actual resurrection experience. It seems to me like a gradual transformation. But the point is, if you can do that with fire magic, you can probably do that with ice magic. And we needed to get icy people from somewhere, right? Like somebody that wasn't an ice magic practitioner started doing it and transformed into the first other or the first Night's Queen or something. And so to me, that's what Night's Queen sounds like. But we'll chase it down. We'll figure it out, guys. So I enjoy going at the slow pace that we do and sort of just chewing on it, one theme at a time, and making slow progress. And I feel like it's going good. So it's pretty exciting. I love this topic of Night's Queen and Nissa Nissa going in and out of the trees. So final thoughts on that subject?
Not too much.
I really enjoyed this discussion, though. I always love talking about Nissa Nissa, and I think that we found some really, really cool connections, and the chat was really great today with those super chats and kind of some of the finds that we found today.
Yeah, I'm definitely going to have to record this one and put it out on the podcast stream. It's a lot of nuggets in this one. Yeah. A lot of collaborative ideas and stuff too. This was really great. So we're right at the 3 hours mark, and I know Amanda needs to go to work. So Amanda, thank you for giving us so much of your time today. Really appreciate it. And the same goes to you, Painkiller Jane.
Yeah.
Thank your husband on behalf of us for entertaining the pups.
Yes. Do you hear them yelling in the background? Sorry.
No, we can't at all. He's kept them quiet enough.
He did
so it's
really good. Yeah. Yeah, he did really good.
And thanks, Jojo Lady Dane, putting Amanda's channel in the chat. Of course, I assume all of you guys are subscribed to the Disputed Lands, but I'll just remind you to make sure you click the notification bell for both, my channel and the Disputed Lands, so that you know when we got a live stream or a new video coming out. And don't forget to subscribe to the Between Two Weirwoods YouTube channel, because if I'm able to schedule the Gray Area episode next week, it will be on the Between Two Weirwoods channel. So there you go, guys. That's it. I love you all. You're all beautiful. Thanks, Amanda and Crowfood's daughter. And and of course, Sandrixian, get well soon. I'm sure she'll watch back. So thanks for all the art, and feel better. So that's it, guys. See you next week. Bye-bye.
See you next week. Bye.
Bye.